Chapter 1927. As long as Chu Fengmian obtained this sword principle totem, his swordsmanship could be further improved. The incomplete swordsmanship in the sword principle totem was related to the sword principle origin. If Chu Fengmian wanted to comprehend the sword principle origin, he had to obtain all the sword principle totems. Chu Fengmian sat in front of the sword principle totem and injected his spiritual consciousness into it to explore the inhibition formation. The sword principle totem was hidden in the depths of the sword lake and was protected by countless inhibition formations. It was as difficult as ascending to heaven to seize it. Many of the inhibition formations were set up by experts in the celestial realm. Ordinary warriors, even warriors in the half-step celestial realm, would be killed by the inhibition formations if they wanted to seize the sword principle totem. However, Chu Fengmian was not so worried. He carefully looked at the inhibition formations. Suddenly, a stream of spiritual power was emitted from Chu Fengmian's body and injected into the sword principle totem. This stream of spiritual power entered the sword principle totem and turned into a vortex, constantly devouring the power of the inhibition formations. The sky-devouring secret skill had the ability to devour all the heavens. Chu Fengmian controlled a part of the sky-devouring origin. Although he did not have the ability to devour all the heavens, it was easy for him to deal with some inhibition formations. Chu Fengmian activated the sky-devouring secret skill and devoured the power of the inhibition formations in the sword principle totem little by little. The power of the countless inhibition formations in the sword principle totem was obliterated little by the sky-devouring secret skill. Of course, in order not to alert the enemy, Chu Fengmian did not break all the inhibition formations in one breath. He just emptied the spiritual power in them. In this way, the expert who set up the inhibition formations could not notice what was happening here. Chu Fengmian easily solved the restriction formation that had been set up in the sword Tao totem. However, compared to the inhibition formations in the sword principle totem, the spiritual consciousness that had been watching the sword lake was more troublesome. This spiritual awareness was almost always locked onto Chu Fengmian's body, watching his every move. As long as Chu Fengmian acted without thinking, he would attract the attention of this spiritual sense. Although the owner of this spiritual sense was only a half-step celestial being expert of the Sea tribe, it was not difficult for Chu Fengmian to kill him. However, Chu Fengmian did not have the ability to kill this person silently. Once this person spread the news, Chu Fengmian's identity would be exposed, and all the plans would be ruined. Wait. Chu Fengmian suppressed the thought of taking the initiative to attack. He just waited here. Chu Fengmian didn't believe that this spiritual awareness would keep checking on him for a total of 10 days while he was comprehending the sword Tao totem. As long as he found a gap, Chu Fengmian could seize the sword principle totem and escape. Time ticked by. During these days, Chu Fengmian didn't just wait. He was also comprehending the various mysteries of this sword principle totem. Although Chu Fengmian didn't have the ability to completely comprehend the mysteries of this sword principle totem in such a short time. During this time, Chu Fengmian confirmed one thing. This sword principle totem should be the second sword principle totem. This made Chu Fengmian a little disappointed. The higher the ranking of the sword principle totem, the stronger the swordsmanship it contained. If it was the sword principle totem ranked first, Chu Fengmian would benefit more after getting it. However, even if it was the sword principle totem ranked second, Chu Fengmian was still amazed by the swordsmanship in it. In just 7 days, Chu Fengmian comprehended dozens of swordsmanship from this sword principle totem. These swordsmanship were the most ancient swordsmanship, which was completely different from the simplified swordsmanship passed down from generation to generation. Each of them contained extremely strong power, which was almost no less than the swordsmanship of the Sea Sword sect. However, although the ancient swordsmanship recorded in this sword principle totem was powerful, it was extremely difficult to comprehend it. Even a sword principal grandmaster couldn't comprehend it thoroughly. It was obscure and difficult to understand. Only Chu Fengmian, who had already touched the threshold of the sword principal origin, could clearly comprehend these swordsmanship. These dozens of ancient swordsmanship were all integrated into the 9 regions swordsmanship by Chu Fengmian and became his power. After integrating these dozens of ancient swordsmanship, Chu Fengmian's power vaguely improved. Although there was no change in Chu Fengmian's realm, Chu Fengmian's strength had improved a lot. This was only the result of 7 days of comprehension. Chu Fengmian was eager to obtain the sword principal totem in just 7 days, which made him yearn for the rewards he would get after obtaining it. This person seems to have been staring at me the entire time. Could it be that my identity has been suspected? Chu Fengmian slowly withdrew the sword essence and thought in his heart with a frown. 7 days. Chu Fengmian had been looking for a gap in the elder's surveillance to seize the sword principal totem. However, the result disappointed Chu Fengmian. This elder had been watching Chu Fengmian for the past 7 days. He didn't relax at all. This also made Chu Fengmian feel extremely troubled. He even suspected that it was because his identity had been exposed and he was suspected by the people of Seaward sect. That was why they were watching him like this. However, Chu Fengmian soon overthrew this idea after thinking for a while. If Chu Fengmian's identity was exposed and he was seen through by the sect master of Seaward sect, Chu Fengmian wouldn't be sitting here. If he came to Sword Lake, the sect master of Seaward sect should have taken action to suppress Chu Fengmian when he was in the main hall. In the main hall, there was the support of the shocking sword essence contained in the stone statue of Seaward Emperor. Once the sect master of Seaward sect took action, he had great confidence in suppressing Chu Fengmian. If Chu Fengmian's identity was exposed, he wouldn't have taken action until now. Although his identity was not exposed, Chu Fengmian still felt that he was being watched. This feeling was getting closer and closer. It was as if Chu Fengmian was a prey targeted by a beast. A few figures appeared in the sky above the Sword Lake. These figures stood above the clouds, making it impossible for anyone to detect them. In just 7 days, he has comprehended the sword principle. Hai Shirsi is really a sword principle genius. With such a monstrous body, why should I worry about not being able to step into the celestial realm? An old man was sizing up Chu Fengmian in the sky above the Sword Lake. His eyes were filled with greed. End of chapter. Chapter 1928. Chu Fengmian sat in front of the sword principal totem. With his eyes closed, a sword intent rose from Chu Fengmian's body. The sword intent was so strong that it soared into the sky and shrouded the entire Sword Lake. What a strong sword principle! How did Hai Shirsi comprehend such a strong sword principle at such a young age? The old man stared at Chu Fengmian and was shocked to see the sword intent erupting from his body. However, the greed in his eyes was even stronger. Such a heaven-defying sword principle. If I get this body, how strong will I be in the future? Rumble. While the old man was talking to himself, Chu Fengmian sat in front of him and comprehended the sword principle totem. The sword intent on his body became more and more turbulent. The sword intent could not be suppressed and burst out in all directions. Chu Fengmian's face was extremely serious and serious. The sword intent that erupted seemed to be brewing something, as if a person was ready to break through at any time. It was the most critical moment to comprehend the sword intent. Now is the time. Heaven and earth possession, reincarnation. The old man shouted coldly. At this moment, his body suddenly exploded and turned into a shadow. He suddenly fell from the sky and rushed towards Chu Fengmian. A burst of heaven and earth power suddenly descended and suppressed Chu Fengmian. The old man's figure rushed towards Chu Fengmian as if he wanted to enter Chu Fengmian's body. After waiting for so long, I finally made my move. However, Chu Fengmian suddenly opened his eyes the moment the old man's figure came to his side. The raging sword intent on Chu Fengmian's body also gradually calmed down. He looked at the old man with a faint smile on his face. His eyes met the old man's. The old man was none other than the sect master of Seaward sect that Chu Fengmian had met before. Chu Fengmian had always felt that someone was watching him and spying on him. Therefore, he deliberately pretended that he was about to make a breakthrough in sword principle in order to force this person out. Chu Fengmian was not surprised to see the sect master of Seaward sect suddenly make a move. Previously, when he was in the main hall, Chu Fengmian felt that the Sword sect's sect master's words had a hidden meaning. Clearly, he didn't have any good intentions. Now that the sect master of the Sword sect had intervened, the confusion in Chu Fengmian's heart suddenly cleared up. The sect master of the Sword sect was actually planning to possess Chu Fengmian. The Tao of possession was typically only used by warriors or fey gods when their bodies were shattered and they were unable to reconstruct their bodies. Of course, there were also some martial artist fey immortals who did not have high aptitude. They could choose to possess martial artist fey immortals with higher aptitude. The sect master of Sword sect wanted to possess Chu Fengmian. That was why he had been keeping an eye on Chu Fengmian. Just now, when Chu Fengmian was comprehending the Sword Tao totem and was about to make a breakthrough in Sword Tao, he suddenly attacked and possessed Chu Fengmian. However, the Sword sect master didn't expect that Chu Fengmian had pretended to be about to break through just to lure him out. Hi 14? I didn't expect you to be prepared. Unfortunately, you still have to die here today. Your body is mine. The Sword sect master saw that Chu Fengmian had noticed, so he simply didn't hide anymore. He laughed loudly and immediately urged his power to the extreme. This power entered Chu Fengmian's body and went straight for Chu Fengmian's soul. He wanted to destroy Chu Fengmian's soul directly so that this body would become ownerless and he could possess it. The Sword sect master originally intended to launch a surprise attack, but since Chu Fengmian had reacted, he directly used a killing move. After all, he was an expert at the peak of the half-step celestial realm. It was a piece of cake for him to deal with a 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. The soul extermination technique. Among the countless martial techniques, it was considered an extremely mysterious one. Generally speaking, martial artists and fey immortals of the same realm would have similar soul power. Therefore, this kind of soul extermination technique was not very useful in the face of martial artists and fey immortals of the same realm. Therefore, few people practiced it. The sect master of the Sword sect clearly had the intention of possessing someone else's body. His soul extermination technique was incomparably mysterious. A stream of spiritual energy turned into a sharp sword and slashed at Chu Fengmian's soul. This kind of competition of power was a confrontation of pure soul power. The Sword sect master suddenly used this move. An ordinary Emperor Gu of the 9 tribulations would have been killed in an instant. However, when Chu Fengmian saw the sharp sword condensed from soul power slashing at him, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. He also urged his soul power to attack. Bang! In the collision of soul power, the sharp sword condensed by the Sword sect master's soul power was instantly shattered. However, there was no change on Chu Fengmian's face. On the other side, the sect master of the Sword sect kept backing away. He had abandoned his body and tried to possess Chu Fengmian without caring about anything else. His soul force was his greatest power, but it had clearly been shattered by Chu Fengmian mercilessly. How can your soul be so powerful? Impossible, even a half-step celestial being doesn't have such a powerful soul. You're not Hai Shirsi, who are you? The Sword sect master stared at Chu Fengmian and shouted in disbelief. Who am I? You don't have to care. Anyway, you're going to be a dead man soon. A sneer appeared at the corner of Chu Fengmian's mouth. Soul attacks were useful against others, but they were useless against Chu Fengmian. Having lived 2 lives, Chu Fengmian's soul and spiritual sense were infinitely powerful. His soul and spiritual sense were far above martial artists of the same realm. If the Sea Sword Sect Master chose to possess someone else, even if it was a half-step celestial being expert, he would have a very high chance of success with so many preparations. Unfortunately, he was targeting Chu Fengmian, a freak who had lived 2 lives. Sword out! Chu Fengmian's palm moved, and the ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword was immediately unsheathed and slashed at the Sea Sword Sect Master. The Sea Sword Sect Master had already noticed that there was something wrong with Chu Fengmian's identity. He couldn't let him leave alive today. Moreover, the Sea Sword Sect Master was planning to possess Chu Fengmian, so there was no way Chu Fengmian would let him go. Run! The Sea Sword Sect Master saw Chu Fengmian's sword, and his figure flashed, turning into a ray of light and fleeing out of the Sword Lake. As long as he left the Sword Lake, he could call for the experts of the Sea Sword Sect, and even let the Sea Sword Sect's ancestor, the Emperor of the Sea Sword Sea, deal with Chu Fengmian. Originally, even in the Sword Lake, there were always experts of the Sea Sword Sect monitoring. However, the Sea Sword Sect Master deliberately sealed the Sword Lake in order to prevent the news of him possessing Chu Fengmian from spreading. Now, he had shot himself in the foot. End of chapter. Chapter 1929. The Sea Sword Sect's Sect Master had calculated everything, but never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that his possession would fail. After all, as a half-step celestial human realm expert, possession of any 9 tribulations Emperor Gu was a piece of cake. He had calculated for a long time but did not expect that Hai Shirsi was actually Chu Fengmian in disguise. Chu Fengmian, on the other hand, had an amazing opportunity. As a person who had lived 2 lives, his soul was far more powerful than martial artists of the same realm. It completely ruined the patriarch of the Sea Sword Sect's plan. In order to possess Chu Fengmian, the Sea Sword Sect Master had already abandoned his physical body. Now, his strength was less than 30% of his peak. If the Sea Sword Sect Master still had his physical body and strength at his peak, he might not be afraid of Chu Fengmian. But now, he could only flee. Only by escaping from the Sword Lake could he attract the attention of the other Sea Sword Sect expert. This escape light was pushed to the extreme and flew out of the Sword Lake. Want to escape? Since you want to possess me in this Sword Lake, then you shall die here today. Chu Fengmian looked at the Sea Sword Sect Master. Chu Fengmian knew exactly what the Sea Sword Sect Master was thinking. If the Sea Sword Sect Master was allowed to escape from the Sword Lake, it would really be troublesome. The Sword Lake was the sacred place of the Sea Sword Sect. It was located in the center of the Sea Sword Sect and had countless experts of the Sea Sword Sect. Even Chu Fengmian was vulnerable in front of the entire Sea Sword Sect. Moreover, there was also a celestial human realm expert in the Sea Sword Sect. Chu Fengmian would never let the Sea Sword Sect Master escape. But now, the formation that the Sea Sword Sect Master had set up to seal the Sword Lake was a great help to Chu Fengmian. In the Sword Lake, even if Chu Fengmian used all his strength, the outside world would not know. Seal! The power of Ancestor Tianlong in Chu Fengmian's bloodline immediately erupted. As Chu Fengmian's big hand suddenly grabbed, the power of space immediately suppressed the Sea Sword Sect Master. The escape light of the Sea Sword Sect Master slowed down instantly. His speed was even slower than some divine sea realm and wind controlling realm martial artists. Kill! The moment he suppressed the master of the Sea Sword Sect with the power of space, Chu Fengmian also made his move. His escape light was extremely fast, catching up to the leader of the Sea Sword Sect in an instant. Facing the leader of the Sea Sword Sect, he mercilessly slashed down with his sword. Do you think you can still escape in front of me? Chu Fengmian looked at the leader of the Sea Sword clan and sneered. Immediately, his sword will erupted and condensed on the tip of his sword. He then slashed at the leader of the Sea Sword clan. Ah! The sect lord of the sea's word sect let out a blood-curdling scream as his soul was destroyed countless times. Every time his soul was destroyed, the sea sword sect's sect master's strength would weaken a little. When his strength continued to weaken, he would no longer have the ability to reconstruct himself. Hi Shirsi, no, senior, don't kill me, don't kill me, I'm willing to let you be the master of the sea sword sect. I'll let you comprehend the sword Tao totem. I can do anything for you. The sea sword sect's sect master screamed loudly. He didn't want to die. He had always dreamed of reaching the celestial realm. He wanted to pass the celestial tribulation, which was why he seized others time and time again. The previous times, the sea sword sect's sect master succeeded easily. He didn't expect to fail miserably this time, encountering Chu Fengmian, his nemesis. Hearing the words of the sea sword sect's sect master, Chu Fengmian sneered. The sea sword sect's sect master had possessed countless disciples of the sea sword sect. No wonder the sea sword sect was willing to pay a huge price to cultivate Hai Chang'e and Chu Fengmian. It turned out that they were all preparing for the sea sword sect's sect master's possession. The profound Tao divine vein elixir was probably given to the sea sword sect's sect master for possession. Although Chu Fengmian wasn't a righteous person, he couldn't do something like possession of a disciple of his sect. Moreover, the sea sword sect's sect master was planning to possess Chu Fengmian today. He had committed a capital crime that couldn't be redeemed. Die. The sword in Chu Fengmian's hand fell mercilessly, turning into a sword chi that slashed down. The sea sword sect's sect master's soul was instantly killed hundreds of times by this sword chi. In the end, the sea sword sect's sect master's soul was extremely weak and couldn't be reconstructed anymore. He died. Let's go and seize the sword principal totem. After getting rid of the sea sword sect's sect master, who had been watching Chu Fengmian, it was now time for Chu Fengmian to seize the sword principal totem. The sea sword sect's sect master had sealed the sword lake. If he didn't go out for too long, he would definitely be noticed by other experts of the sea sword sect. Fortunately, Chu Fengmian had made all the preparations. His escape light arrived in front of the sword principal totem in an instant. He didn't need to hide his cultivation level anymore. He immediately operated the sky-devouring secret technique and shrouded the sword principal totem. Countless formations and restrictions operated in the sword principal totem, resisting the power of the sky-devouring secret technique. However, 99% of the power of the formations and restrictions in the sword principal totem had been quietly wiped out by Chu Fengmian with the sky-devouring secret technique. Now, even if it was fully operated, it couldn't resist the power of the sky-devouring secret technique. There was a boom. All the formations and restrictions on the sword principal totem were broken. Chu Fengmian grabbed with his right hand and the sword principal totem fell into his palm. Chu Fengmian put it into his empty ring and then rushed straight to the sky above the sword lake. Inside the sea sword sect, an ancient hall with a door that had been sealed for a long time and hadn't been opened for hundreds of years suddenly opened the moment the sword principal totem's restriction formation was broken. An earth-shattering sword intent burst out from the hall as a figure flew out of the hall. This shocking sword intent could be clearly felt by the entire sea sword sect. Many disciples of the sea sword sect showed some charm in their eyes when they felt the sword intent. However, the elders of the sea sword sect were shocked when they felt the shocking sword intent. They knew the origin of the sword intent. The Emperor of the Sword Sea. The sword intent was the ancestor of the sea sword sect and the only celestial realm expert in the sea sword sect. It came from the Emperor of the Sword Sea. The Emperor of the Sword Sea, who had been in seclusion for hundreds of years, suddenly came out of seclusion. And he was angry. The chilling power contained in the sword intent proved the Emperor of the Sword Sea's anger. What's going on? Why did the Emperor of the Sword Sea suddenly come out of seclusion? Is there an enemy invasion? Many elders of the Sea Sword sect were puzzled, but many of them found that the Emperor of the Sword Sea's escape light was heading in the direction of the Sword Lake. The Sword Lake. What happened? When everyone looked at the Sword Lake, an unbelievable scene suddenly happened. A crack suddenly appeared in the formation that had been covering the Sword Lake. End of chapter. Chapter 1930. Sword Lake, the sacred place of Seawall sect, contained the inheritance of Seawall sect's sword principle. In order to prevent the invasion of foreign enemies, the Sword Lake had always been the place with the most restrictive formations in Seawall sect. Especially the great formation that protected the Sword Lake, which enveloped above, was set up by a celestial realm powerhouse. Now, a crack had actually appeared on the formation, causing the elders of the Sea Sword sect to be extremely shocked. In addition to being shocked, many experts of Seawall sect suddenly understood that the Emperor of Overlooking Sword Sea had awakened because something had happened in the Sword Lake. The crack was just the beginning. Then, more and more cracks appeared above the Sword Lake formation, and the entire formation was on the verge of collapse. Crack. Suddenly, a figure rushed out from the center of the countless cracks. This formation is really difficult to deal with. Fortunately, I have mastered the Sky-Devouring Origin and the Sky-Devouring Secret technique. It's enough to destroy the power of the formation. This figure was Chu Fengmian, who had seized the Sword Principal Totem. After seizing the Sword Principal Totem, Chu Fengmian no longer had to hide his identity. Now, he had to leave Seawall sect as soon as possible. Chu Fengmian had already sensed that a shocking sword intent had awakened. The owner of this sword intent was definitely a celestial realm expert, the Emperor of Overlooking Sword Sea. The Sword Principal Totem was the treasure of Seawall sect. There must be a restrictive formation set up by the Emperor of Overlooking Sword Sea. The moment Chu Fengmian broke the restrictive formation on the Sword Principal Totem, the Emperor of Overlooking Sword Sea would have sensed it and come out of seclusion. Looking from afar, Chu Fengmian saw a figure flying towards the Sword Lake. It was a middle-aged man who looked much younger than the sect master of Seawall sect. However, Chu Fengmian knew that this middle-aged man was much older than the sect master of Seawall sect. He was the patriarch of Seawall sect. He was also the only celestial realm expert in Seawall sect, the Emperor of Overlooking Sword Sea. Chu Fengmian glanced over and saw that the Emperor of Overlooking Sword Sea was holding a spiritual sword. He turned into a ray of light and flew towards Chu Fengmian. The speed of this escape light was extremely fast. Chu Fengmian had never seen such a fast sword light. Although it hadn't completely transformed into an ultimate immortal weapon, it wasn't inferior to Chu Fengmian's Ancestral Dragon Supreme Sword and Titanic Gate Godly Sword. The Overlooking Sword Sea Emperor looked at Chu Fengmian with boundless killing intent. The moment he felt the killing intent, Chu Fengmian shuddered all over. He sensed great danger, just like when he was targeted by the Yuan Whale Emperor. Neither the Overlooking Sword Ocean Monarch nor the Origin Whale Monarch were existences that Chu Fengmian couldn't fight against. Let's go. Chu Fengmian didn't hesitate at all. After breaking the formation above the Sword Lake, he transformed into the appearance of Ancestor Tianlong and quickly flew out of the Sea Sword sect. Only death awaited Chu Fengmian if he fought the Emperor of the Linjian Sea. Although Chu Fengmian was strong now, he was still far from being a true celestial realm expert. Chu Fengmian could only injure the Mad Dragon Emperor in front of him. The Overlooking Sword Sea Emperor was a veteran celestial realm expert. His strength wasn't something that the newly ascended Mad Dragon Emperor could compare with. Chu Fengmian transformed into Ancestor Tianlong and fled out of the Sea Sword sect at several times the speed. You want to escape? Evil creature, put down the Sword Dao Totem. How dare you steal my Sea Sword sect's Sword Dao Totem? You're courting death. Waterfront Ocean Monarch saw Chu Fengmian's fleeing figure and chased after Chu Fengmian even faster. The Sword Dao Totem contained the restriction formations he'd set up. Now that Chu Fengmian had broken all of them, it was clear that the totem had fallen into Chu Fengmian's hands. There was no way he'd let Chu Fengmian take the totem. A mere 9 tribulations Emperor Gu dares to steal from my sea sword sect? If I let you go, I won't be worthy of the title of Ocean Emperor. The overlooking sword sea emperor let out a long roar and sped up countless times as he chased after Chu Fengmian. The speed of this escape light was even faster than Chu Fengmian's. Even though Chu Fengmian had transformed into Ancestor Tianlong and used the power of Ancestor Tianlong's bloodline to push his speed to the extreme, he still couldn't outrun the overlooking sword sea emperor. This was absolute strength, the absolute strength of a celestial realm expert. If this continues, the overlooking sword sea emperor will catch up to me. Chu Fengmian frowned when he saw the emperor of the waterfront sea closing in. The emperor of the waterfront sea's speed was beyond Chu Fengmian's imagination. Seal! Chu Fengmian waved his hand and condensed the power of Ancestor Tianlong in his palm. He used the power of space to suppress the overlooking sword sea emperor and delay him. Space control? Ancestor Tianlong's bloodline? You have some ability, but do you really think you can delay me with just a few moves? The overlooking sword sea emperor sneered when he sensed the suppression of space. His sword flashed and several rays of sword light swept out. The suppression of space on the overlooking sword sea emperor was completely shattered. It was useless. Chu Fengmian wanted to delay the overlooking sword sea emperor with the power of space, but it was useless against him. A celestial realm expert is truly terrifying. Chu Fengmian's eyes were cold. Even the strongest half-step celestial realm expert couldn't completely withstand Chu Fengmian's spatial suppression. They would be affected by at least 30%. But it was useless against the overlooking sword sea emperor. Even if Chu Fengmian had Tianlong's bloodline and was a variant of the world, his methods were useless in the face of absolute power. I have no choice but to use this move. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed with determination, and he suddenly clawed at the space in front of him. He wanted to tear apart space. If he forcefully tore apart space, Chu Fengmian wouldn't know where he would end up if he entered it. Chu Fengmian wasn't familiar with the Songhai starfield, so he might end up in some dangerous places. But seeing the overlooking sword sea emperor chasing after him, Chu Fengmian had no other choice. He transformed into the primordial war dragon and tore apart space with his claw. Chu Fengmian's figure suddenly rushed towards the space crack. You want to escape by tearing apart space? Die for this emperor. Sword of the Sea God. Kill everything. Just as Chu Fengmian was about to rush into the space crack, he felt an intense danger. This feeling made Chu Fengmian quickly dodge to the side. A ray of sword light suddenly fell from the sky and slashed at Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was very familiar with the power contained in the sword. It was the sword of the sea god. End of chapter. Chapter 1931. Sword of the Sea God. It was the strongest sword technique recorded in the Ocean's Word sect. Chu Fengmian was very familiar with this sword technique. Chu Fengmian had once disguised himself as Hai Shirsi and used this sword technique to defeat Hai Chang'e. The sword of the sea god displayed by the Emperor of the Overlooking Sword Sea was far more powerful than the sword technique Chu Fengmian had once displayed. Rumble. The shadow of the Ocean's Word Emperor merged with the figure of the Emperor of the Overlooking Sword Sea. It seemed as if the Ocean's Word Emperor had come back to life. The power of the sword slashed down from the sky, and the entire sky seemed to be split in half by the power of the sword. Everything was destroyed wherever the blade passed. It was unstoppable. This was the sword technique displayed by a true celestial realm expert. Chu Fengmian felt that if he hadn't dodged just now, he would have definitely died if he had been touched by the sword's edge. In terms of sword Dao comprehension, Chu Fengmian wasn't inferior to the Emperor of the Overlooking Sword Sea. In fact, he even surpassed the Emperor of the Overlooking Sword Sea. However, the gap between Chu Fengmian and the Emperor of the Overlooking Sword Sea was too great. A Celestial Realm elite could easily kill a half-step Celestial Realm martial artist or demon god with a casual strike. Even some famous half-step Celestial Realm experts, such as Heavenly King Huang, Young Emperor, and even Yu Wuhan, would be severely injured if they were hit by a Celestial Realm expert. A casual strike from a Celestial Realm expert could even destroy some small continents with a single punch. Moreover, the Emperor of the Overlooking Sword Sea was truly enraged. He attacked with the strongest sword technique of the Ocean's Word sect and used the Sword of the Sea God to kill Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's figure flashed and temporarily dodged the blade of the Sword of the Sea God, but he didn't dare to relax. Because in the next moment, several more blades slashed at Chu Fengmian from all directions. The Emperor of the Overlooking Sword Sea was truly enraged and didn't intend to give Chu Fengmian any chance to escape. Sword after sword, Chu Fengmian didn't even have time to breathe. Several sword edges blasted towards Chu Fengmian in an instant. They slashed from all directions at the same time, leaving Chu Fengmian with nowhere to run and nowhere to retreat. Three Suns Blazing Sword. Chu Fengmian also knew that there was no way out. He unsheathed his Titanic Gate Divine Sword at the same time. On the edges of these two spiritual swords, a colorless flame burned. The pure Yang Heavenly Fire and Chu Fengmian's sword intent merged into one. Suddenly, a sword slashed out. The sky turned into a sea of fire and collided with the Emperor of the approaching sword ocean. The two forces collided in the air and shattered. Even Chu Fengmian was forced to take several steps back. He was slightly injured by the rebounding force. What kind of swordsmanship was this? Immortal swordsmanship? It's even more profound than the Sea Sword Sect's sword arts? The monarch's eyes flashed with surprise when he saw Chu Fengmian block his sword. After all, Chu Fengmian was only Emperor Gu of the Nine Tribulations. He was no different from an ant in his eyes. Yet, he was able to block his sword. The Sea Emperor of Linjian saw through the reason why Chu Fengmian could block his sword. It was because Chu Fengmian's sword technique was even more profound than the Sea Sword Sect's sword technique. The Sea Sword Sect's swordsmanship had barely reached the level of an immortal art. With the monarch's strength, his swordsmanship was a pure immortal art. Yet, Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship was even better than his. This proved that Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship was among the best even among immortal arts. Interesting. You have such a comprehension of the sword Tao at such a young age. This emperor doesn't want to kill you. I'll capture you and nurture you well. You can become a servant of my Sea Sword sect and serve my sect. The monarch looked at Chu Fengmian with interest. Although Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship could resist him, Chu Fengmian was still an ant that he could slaughter at will. He could crush at will. Is that so? I'm afraid you don't have the ability to do so. Chu Fengmian shouted and unsheathed his sword again. This time, the power of the stars suddenly descended and condensed in Chu Fengmian's sword. Voracious Wolf, Giant Door, Lutsuan, Heavenly Mystery. The first four styles of the nine profound immortal art burst out at the same time. The moment the sword was slashed out, the sword chi and the power of the stars gathered together and turned into a galaxy. It blasted out and shrouded the imperial capital of Linjian in the sword chi galaxy. Within the sword chi galaxy, hundreds of sword chi slashed at the monarch at the same time, annihilating everything within it. Another swordsmanship? This swordsmanship seems to be the power of the nine profound immortal venerates nine profound immortal art. You've actually turned the nine profound immortal art into a swordsmanship? Seeing the sword chi galaxy, the overlooking sword Sea Emperor was shocked. He recognized that the power of Chu Fengmian's sword came from the nine profound immortal art. But now, Chu Fengmian was using the nine profound immortal art in the form of a swordsmanship. This proved that Chu Fengmian had transformed the nine profound immortal art into a swordsmanship. It was as difficult as creating a new swordsmanship. It was comparable to the swordsmanship created by the ocean's word monarch. Good, a sword genius. I didn't expect to meet such a genius. It's a pity to have you as a servant. I'll suppress you and make you comprehend swordsmanship every day. I'll make the swordsmanship you comprehend be used by me. The overlooking sword sea emperor laughed loudly. Suddenly, his sword flashed and slashed out again. Rumble! As the sword overlooking sea emperor slashed out with his sword, the sword Chi star river that enveloped him was completely destroyed. The sword Chi galaxy didn't even have the ability to threaten the monarch. It was broken with a wave of his hand. Celestial realm experts are truly terrifying when they're truly angry. Chu Fengmian felt a chill in his heart. Normally, when Chu Fengmian fought with others, he would crush them with his tyrannical strength. But now, when he encountered the Emperor of Waterfront Sword Sea, Chu Fengmian's most tyrannical swordsmanship was no match for him. This was the true strength of a celestial realm expert. Even if the monarch's swordsmanship wasn't as good as Chu Fengmian's, he completely crushed Chu Fengmian in terms of strength. Chu Fengmian was already close to his limit to be able to withstand the monarch's continuous attack. Even Chu Fengmian, who had experienced countless battles of life and death, couldn't withstand such threatening swordsmanship. Chu Fengmian's current situation was extremely dangerous. As long as Chu Fengmian relaxed a little, he would fall into an irrecoverable situation. He was walking on a tightrope and couldn't relax. End of chapter. Chapter 1932. I must escape. Only death awaited Chu Fengmian if he continued to fight with the Sea Emperor of the Near Sword Sea. However, Chu Fengmian was now entangled with the Sea Emperor of the Near Sword Sea. It was not easy for him to escape. While Chu Fengmian was pondering, the Emperor suddenly moved. He took a step forward, approached Chu Fengmian, and slashed down with his sword. The moment the sword slashed down, streaks of sword aura suddenly transformed into a pagoda and pressed down. Infinite transformations. When one reached great success in sword Dao, they could do anything with their sword art. He didn't plan on killing Chu Fengmian. Instead, he wanted to capture him alive. He wanted to use Chu Fengmian. The power of the pagoda was no less than that of a true suppressive immortal art. Chu Fengmian felt immense pressure. His body and power were completely suppressed by the pagoda. Damn it! You want to suppress me? Absolutely impossible. Ting Serpent Bloodline, Progenitor Tianlong Bloodline. Heaven-devouring beast bloodline, devour the heavens! At this critical juncture, Chu Fengmian couldn't care less about holding back. All of his bloodline power erupted at this moment, and his strength soared more than tenfold in an instant. He gathered his spiritual power and grasped at the air. A gust of heaven-devouring power erupted as he used the heaven-devouring secret technique, shrouding Chu Fengmian's head. The heaven-devouring secret technique resisted the suppression of the sword aura pagoda. Ting Serpent Bloodline? Heaven-devouring beast bloodline? How is this possible? How can one person control so many innate divine beast bloodlines? The Emperor was shocked to see the bloodline power erupting from Chu Fengmian. Then, his gaze shrouded Chu Fengmian. His gaze was like a torch, and all of Chu Fengmian's secrets were exposed. Half-step celestial realm and monster deities couldn't see through Chu Fengmian's hidden power, but it couldn't be hidden from true celestial realm powerhouses. The overlooking sword Sea Emperor stared at Chu Fengmian and quickly took in all of his secrets. Genesis Chi, a variant of heaven and earth. You've actually transcended a heaven-defying tribulation? The sword monarch's voice trembled in disbelief. A heaven-defying tribulation, a variant of heaven and earth. It was an incomparably ancient myth. Those who could transcend a heaven-defying tribulation could only be found in myth. But Chu Fengmian had really done it. He'd merged with Genesis Chi and become a variant of heaven and earth. Good. Your body has been fused with primeval energy, and you've become a variant of heaven and earth. Your flesh is no different from the flesh of a real Khanate god-beast. I'll kill you and devour your bloodline to become a variant of heaven and earth. The Emperor looked at Chu Fengmian with extreme excitement. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he immediately attacked. At this moment, the Emperor no longer wanted to capture Chu Fengmian alive, serve him, and comprehend sword arts for him. None of this was as beneficial as directly killing Chu Fengmian and devouring his flesh. As long as he could kill Chu Fengmian and devour his flesh, he could also become a variant of heaven and earth. He'd become an existence comparable to Khanate divine beasts. Khanate divine beasts were even stronger than immortal emperors. Just the thought of devouring Chu Fengmian and becoming such a heaven-defying existence made him excited to the extreme. He couldn't help but tremble from excitement. His only thought now was to kill Chu Fengmian. The tip of his sword changed in an instant. There was only slaughter in it. Suddenly, dozens of sword tips slashed out. Every move was fatal. It was all to kill Chu Fengmian. Not good, he wants to kill me. Chu Fengmian was nervous to the extreme after seeing the Emperor's sudden change. If the Sea Emperor wanted to capture Chu Fengmian alive, Chu Fengmian would have some leeway to deal with him. Chu Fengmian was in a stalemate with the Emperor, looking for an opportunity to escape. After all, the Emperor couldn't use his full strength if he wanted to capture Chu Fengmian alive. But now that the Emperor of the Linjian Sea wanted to kill him, he didn't care anymore and unleashed his full strength, leaving no room for Chu Fengmian to fight back. The pressure on Chu Fengmian multiplied. Each and every one of these dozens of sword edges was fatal. Chu Fengmian's body would be torn to shreds, and he would die on the spot. Four-sided hurricane sword. Chu Fengmian roared. Several thousand strands of sword energy flew out from the world-edge sword case on his back and coiled around his sword. As Chu Fengmian attacked, sword energy enveloped the blade and turned into dozens of sword energy tornadoes that clashed with the Emperor of overlooking Sword Sea. It's useless. Your sword technique is good, but you're too weak. You can't even use 1% of your sword technique's true power. If you were in the same realm as me, I wouldn't be your opponent today. Unfortunately, you're just a little Emperor Gu of the 9 tribulations. The Emperor flickered and sent out more sword light. He had nothing to fear. As long as he kept attacking Chu Fengmian would eventually show a flaw. Chu Fengmian had to deal with his sword with all his strength. Otherwise, he would be injured or killed. One after another, the swords slashed out. Chu Fengmian found it more and more difficult to resist. Chu Fengmian and the Emperor were 2 realms apart, especially the celestial realm. Mortal immortals had other realms that couldn't be crossed. The Emperor didn't attack by force, but kept wearing down Chu Fengmian's strength. If the Emperor tried to kill Chu Fengmian would have a chance to escape. But now, the Emperor of Linjian Sea had been sealing the space around Chu Fengmian and only used ordinary sword arts to deal with him. Even if Chu Fengmian wanted to escape, he could escape in any direction. This overlooking Sword Sea Emperor is extremely difficult to deal with. Chu Fengmian found it very tricky. The Emperor didn't have the arrogance of a Celestial Realm expert. Generally, Celestial Realm experts would use all their strength to kill Chu Fengmian when they saw that he was just a Emperor Gu of the 9 tribulations. They wouldn't waste so many tricks. In this case, Chu Fengmian could find a chance to escape. Back in the chaotic ocean, the Origin Whale Emperor didn't take Chu Fengmian seriously. That was why Chu Fengmian could find a chance to escape. But the Emperor was different from the Origin Whale Emperor. A lion would use all its strength to catch a rabbit. Chu Fengmian couldn't find any chance to escape. End of chapter. Chapter 1933. A Celestial Realm expert is so difficult to deal with. Chu Fengmian had underestimated a Celestial Realm expert before. Indeed, Chu Fengmian's realm could only confuse the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu to a certain extent. If the Emperor of Linjian Si thought Chu Fengmian was an ordinary Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu, then Chu Fengmian could find an opportunity to escape. But the Celestial Realm experts had different personalities. The Emperor of Linjian Si was the most cautious one. He was confident in his victory against Chu Fengmian. Because of this, he was not in a hurry at all. It could be said that the Emperor of Linjian Si was Chu Fengmian's nemesis. Chu Fengmian's surprise attack had no effect. Encountering such a Celestial Realm expert was the most troublesome character for Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was resisting the sword qi while thinking hard, looking for an opportunity. The Emperor of Linjian Si just looked at Chu Fengmian with a sneer. He was not in a hurry. As long as Chu Fengmian could not resist and was injured, then he could easily kill Chu Fengmian. Especially in the Seasword sect, the Emperor of Linjian Si was not worried that someone would come to save Chu Fengmian. The time, place, and people were all on his side. This little guy is only in the realm of Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu, but he can resist my attacks for so long. It seems that this person has another fortuitous encounter. I don't know where such a monster came from. Chu Fengmian was definitely the most powerful Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu that the Emperor of Linjian Si had ever seen. Not to mention the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu, even among the martial artists and demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm, there were very few who could withstand so many attacks from him. Who is this person? How can the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu fight with the Emperor of Linjian Si for so long? No wonder Hai Shirsi's strength skyrocketed so quickly. Someone is impersonating him. How dare he steal the sword totem? This kid is tired of living. Several Seasword sect elders also gathered at the side, but none of them made a move. Since the Emperor of Linjian Si was personally making a move, there was naturally no need for them to make a move. That kid can't hold on much longer. Suddenly, one of the elders spoke. Chu Fengmian's figure, but he did not notice the sudden sword qi behind him. Boundless defense, but it only shattered half of it. The other half of the sword qi directly pierced into Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian retreated again and again with a pale face. This half of the sword qi entered Chu Fengmian's body and instantly destroyed his internal organs. Although it was temporarily suppressed, it was still destroying Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian had no choice but to divide his strength to suppress it. This Emperor Gu was Emperor Gu Ning with Linjian Emperor Linjian, sword with him to die with him. He's a Nine Tribulation ancient emperor after all. No matter how heaven-defying he is, he's no match for the Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea. Was with him. Hai Fengmian's edition. The overlooking Sword Ocean Emperor saw this scene as well. The moment he saw Chu Fengmian injured, his main body suddenly moved. In an instant, the body of the Emperor Linjian's sword merged with the spiritual sword in his hand, turning into a killing blow that slashed at Chu Fengmian. The power of this killing blow was even more terrifying than the sword of the sea god. Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a smile just as the killing blow was about to kill him. Finally, he can't help but make a move himself. The Emperor of the Overlook Sword Sea had become one with his sword. He had condensed all his strength into this killing blow, and had also removed the seal around him. This was the opportunity that Chu Fengmian had been waiting for. Devour the heavens! Boom! Inside Chu Fengmian's body, the heaven-devouring secret skill suddenly broke out and devoured the half of the sword qi that had entered Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian deliberately endured the sword qi just now. Although it did not feel good, the Emperor Linjian's sword could not help but make a move himself. This was Chu Fengmian's only chance. However, this was also the most dangerous moment. If Chu Fengmian couldn't withstand this fatal blow, he wouldn't be able to escape. He would probably be killed by the waterfront Sword Ocean Emperor in an instant. An ancient jar appeared in Chu Fengmian's hand. The jar of the human emperor. A broken apex immortal weapon. This jar was Chu Fengmian's final trump card. Primordial human emperor, enlighten all living beings. Chu Fengmian roared again and again. The jar of the human emperor suddenly took on the appearance of the human emperor halberd in his hand. Now, the Renhuang jar in Chu Fengmian's hand had already condensed 7 fragments. It already had some of the ancient Renhuang jar's power. The primordial human emperor had swept across the world with the halberd and established the status of the human race. The halberd of the Renhuang was formed. Chu Fengmian held the halberd of the Renhuang in his hand. It had the might that swept across the heavens in the past. He swept it towards the emperor of the approaching sword sea. What is this? An apex immortal weapon? A true apex immortal weapon? How is this possible? How could such a thing be in your hands? No one would have thought that Chu Fengmian still had a trump card at this time, and that it was so frightening. Apex immortal weapon, the human emperor jar. The Emperor Linjian's sword was a celestial realm powerhouse, but he had only heard of apex immortal weapons and had never seen one before. The spirit sword in his hand was called an immortal weapon. Although there was only one word difference between it and an apex immortal weapon, the difference was like the difference between heaven and earth. Moreover, the human emperor jar was a spirit weapon of the primordial human emperor. Even among apex immortal weapons, it was an incomparably tyrannical existence. Chu Fengmian suddenly swept out with the human emperor halberd, giving the Emperor Linjian's sword no time to react. He could only clash with the halberd with his killing blow. This was the first time Chu Fengmian had used the human emperor jar after transcending the heaven-defying tribulation and becoming a worldly variant. Previously, when Chu Fengmian used the jar, he felt a sense of strain, as if he didn't deserve to use the jar's power at all. The jar was an apex immortal weapon. Even if it was broken, it wasn't something that anyone could control. Previously, Chu Fengmian had barely been able to control the jar. He couldn't unleash its power at all. It was as if he'd obtained a treasure and couldn't unleash its power at all. He could only use it to smash people. But this time, when Chu Fengmian used the jar again, he felt a telepathic connection with it. After Chu Fengmian had transcended the heaven-defying tribulation and become a worldly variant, the jar seemed to have recognized him as its master. This made the jar's power increase countless times. Even Chu Fengmian hadn't expected the jar's power to be so tyrannical this time. Even though it was the Emperor Linjian's sword's killing blow, Chu Fengmian wasn't afraid at all. End of chapter. Chapter 1934. Chu Fengmian held the human emperor's halberd in his hand and met the emperor's fatal strike head-on. Chu Fengmian didn't know any halberd techniques, nor had he used the halberd much. But now, when Chu Fengmian held the human emperor's halberd, he didn't feel the slightest bit unfamiliar. He was incomparably familiar with it. The human emperor's halberd was like a part of his body. This was the power of the human emperor jar after it recognized Chu Fengmian as its master. The jar was an extreme immortal weapon. Even if it was broken, it knew how to fight alongside its master. Break! Chu Fengmian held the halberd in his hand and clashed with the fatal strike in the air. The heavens seemed to be on the verge of shattering under the collision. The entire seaward sect was on the verge of collapse, swaying constantly as countless palaces collapsed. The Emperor of the Sword overlooking sea also felt the power of the human emperor's halberd. He'd used all his trump cards in this strike. It was the so-called strongest strike of the Emperor of the Sword overlooking sea. As a celestial realm expert, the Emperor of the Sword overlooking sea went all out in the face of the human emperor's halberd. 99% of the power of the collision was neutralized by the halberd, but even this little bit of backlash almost shattered Chu Fengmian's body. The Emperor of the Sword overlooking sea's full-strength strike was really too strong. It was far beyond Chu Fengmian's imagination. If the Emperor Jar hadn't recognized Chu Fengmian as its master at this time and erupted with several times more power, it would have been replaced by the Emperor Jar in its previous state. Under this collision, Chu Fengmian would definitely be killed. Not even his bones would be left. There was no suspense. But even with the human Emperor's halberd erupting with several times more power, Chu Fengmian still felt that he couldn't resist the Emperor of the Sword overlooking sea. The Emperor's halberd in his hand showed signs of shattering. Although the jar in Chu Fengmian's hand had condensed 7 fragments, it wasn't truly complete after all. It was only a broken extreme immortal weapon. Under such a huge force, the human Emperor's halberd couldn't withstand it and was knocked back into the human Emperor's jar. Even with the help of the human Emperor's halberd, it's still impossible for me to truly defeat a celestial realm expert. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but marvel at this scene. Even the halberd of the Emperor couldn't defeat sword overlooking sea monarch despite being several times stronger. The strength of the celestial realm was indeed different from that of the half-step celestial realm. This huge threshold represented the difference between immortals and mortals. Although he couldn't defeat the Emperor of the waterfront sword sea, with the help of the human Emperor's halberd, Chu Fengmian was able to find an opportunity to retreat. Go! The sharpness of the halberd of the human Emperor forced the Sea Emperor to retreat temporarily. Chu Fengmian seized the opportunity and immediately flew out of the Sea Sword sect with the halberd in hand. The Sea Sword sect's mountain-guarding grand formation had been activated. The inescapable net was moving towards Chu Fengmian, trying to trap him within. With the human Emperor's halberd in hand, Chu Fengmian suddenly stabbed forward and broke a gap in the mountain-guarding grand formation of the Sea Sword sect. Immediately, Chu Fengmian turned into a ray of light and rushed out. With the sword principal totem in hand, Chu Fengmian only needed to leave the Sea Sword sect. The vast Sea Star region was so big. If Chu Fengmian hid, it wouldn't be easy for the Sea Sword sect to find him again. Stop him! Don't let him go! The Waterside Sword Sea Emperor roared angrily. Several elders of the Waterside Sword sect, who were closest to Chu Fengmian, moved to block Chu Fengmian and used countless martial skills to bombard Chu Fengmian. A bunch of half-step celestial realm experts dare to stop me? Chu Fengmian sneered when he saw the elders coming to block him. With the human Emperor's halberd in hand, he could even exchange a few blows with the Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea, let alone these half-step celestial realm elders. Boom! Chu Fengmian swept out with the human Emperor's halberd. 7 or 8 elders of the Sea Sword sect, who were blocking Chu Fengmian, were instantly sent flying by the power of the human Emperor's halberd. These elders of the Sea Sword sect, who were sent flying, all spat out blood. Obviously, they were seriously injured. However, Chu Fengmian didn't continue to chase after them. The Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea was only temporarily pushed back by the sharpness of the human Emperor's halberd. At this moment, he chased after Chu Fengmian again. Go! Tianlong change! Chu Fengmian pushed the escape light to the extreme and dispersed the human Emperor's halberd. He suddenly turned into the appearance of the ancestor, Tianlong, and flew out of the Sea Sword sect in an instant. The moment he left the Sea Sword sect, the formation of the Sea Sword sect could no longer affect Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian instantly activated the power of Tianlong change and disappeared from the Sea Sword sect. The Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea chased after him, but he only saw Chu Fengmian's disappearing figure. He had no idea where Chu Fengmian went. Damn it! Pass down my order. All disciples of the Sea Sword sect are to find this person for me. I'm going to grind his bones to dust. The Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea roared angrily. Chu Fengmian, the insignificant Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations, sneaked into the Sea Sword sect and took away their sect treasure, the Sword Totem. The Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea was a celestial realm expert, but he couldn't stop Chu Fengmian. How could he swallow this anger? All the disciples of the Sea Sword sect also heard the anger in the Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea's words. They all passed down the order to search for Chu Fengmian. The Sea Sword sect was one of the three major sects of the Songhai Star Zone. As long as Chu Fengmian was still in the Songhai Star Zone, he wouldn't be able to escape their search. This time, I really had a narrow escape. It seems that I can't underestimate a celestial realm expert. If it wasn't for the human Emperor's jar, I'm afraid I would have died in the hands of the Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea. Chu Fengmian hid in a remote trench in the Sea of Swords and murmured to himself. His face was extremely pale. He had just used the human Emperor's halberd to fight against the Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea, and every move consumed a lot of spiritual power. Even if Chu Fengmian had the Holy Pulse, it couldn't support his current consumption. Chu Fengmian had already used up all his strength to escape. After hiding in the trench for half a day, Chu Fengmian recovered most of his strength. He looked at the human Emperor's jar. On the jar of the human Emperor, there were some tiny cracks between the fragments. This was the result of the collision between Chu Fengmian's halberd and the Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea. After a few more attacks from the Emperor of the Waterfront Sword Sea, the jar that was formed with great difficulty might break again and scatter into pieces. By then, all of Chu Fengmian's efforts would be in vain. End of chapter. Chapter 1935. Although he'd obtained 7 fragments, the jar hadn't fully recovered and was still extremely fragile. It couldn't withstand the successive attacks of a celestial being. It was fine if it was hit once, but if it was hit several times in a row, the jar might be shattered again. Chu Fengmian didn't want to use the jar because of this consideration. But this time, Chu Fengmian was really pushed to the extreme by the Emperor of Waterfront Sea. He had to use the jar to finally find a chance to escape from the sect. However, Chu Fengmian also knew that he was lucky to be able to escape this time. If it wasn't for the carelessness of the Sword Sea Emperor, who didn't realize that Chu Fengmian still had a trump card like the Emperor Jar, Chu Fengmian wouldn't have had a chance to escape. If Chu Fengmian fought with the Emperor of Waterfront Sea again and the Emperor of Waterfront Sea was on guard, Chu Fengmian would be dead for sure. Though he was cautious by nature, he hadn't expected Chu Fengmian to have the jar of the mortal Emperor in his possession. How could such an immortal weapon block his killing blow? Almost no half-step Celestial Realm elite would be able to withstand that fatal sword move. Even if a Celestial Realm elite were to withstand it, they would be either dead or severely injured. Fortunately, the jar had neutralized 99% of the power, saving Chu Fengmian's life. Realm, my realm is too low. I must break through the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu and step into the half-step Celestial Being realm. Only then will I have the ability to fight a celestial being like the Emperor of Waterfront Sea. Chu Fengmian also deeply understood the terror of a celestial being through this battle. Although he had fought the Emperor of Mad Dragon before and the Emperor had indeed used all his strength, he wouldn't have wanted to kill Chu Fengmian after all. The power of a celestial being was completely different from that of a celestial being with murderous intent. After this battle, Chu Fengmian finally understood the power of a celestial being. However, the battle between Chu Fengmian and the Emperor of Waterfront Sea showed that Chu Fengmian's swordsmanship, his countless opportunities, and his understanding of sword Dao were no less than the Emperor of Waterfront Sea. He was even stronger than the Emperor of Waterfront Sea. Right now, his weakest point was his strength. Even if Chu Fengmian's strength was indeed hundreds or thousands of times greater than that of the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu, and was even more tyrannical than that of a martial artist at the peak of the half-step Celestial Being realm. But in front of the real Celestial realm, it was nothing. Chu Fengmian had a lot of fortuitous encounters. As Chu Fengmian's cultivation level increased, these fortuitous encounters would also show more power. Once Chu Fengmian stepped into the half-step Celestial Being realm, his strength would soar by more than 10 times. The changes it would bring would be various. At that time, Chu Fengmian's real strength might soar by 100 times. At that time, even if Chu Fengmian wasn't in the celestial realm, he wouldn't be too far away from the celestial realm. At the very least, he wouldn't need to use the Emperor's jar to fight against the waterfront Sword Sea Emperor. The disciples of the Sea Sword sect shouldn't be able to find this trench in a short time. I'll stay here and refine the small flying immortal pill first. If Chu Fengmian wanted to break through, the flying immortal pill was a must. Chu Fengmian had bought a lot of sacred herbs from the Moon Ocean Chamber of Commerce. Adding the ones in Shanghai Chang'e's empty ring and the ones in the Linlang dynasty, he could already refine a lot of small flying immortal pills. Taking advantage of the seclusion of the trench, Chu Fengmian could refine all the small flying immortal pills. Chu Fengmian waved his hand. In the trench at the bottom of the seawater suddenly separated. Chu Fengmian condensed a unique space with the power of space. Chu Fengmian stepped into the space. With a thought, the pure yang heavenly fire burned and turned into a pill furnace. Now, Chu Fengmian's control of the pure yang heavenly fire had reached the point where he could do as he pleased. However, it was Chu Fengmian's first time refining an ancient elixir like the small flying immortal pill. Although it wasn't difficult, Chu Fengmian still had to be careful. Chu Fengmian took out a furnace of sacred herbs and threw them in little by little. Controlling the heat, he slowly began to refine, turning them into medicinal liquid and condensing it bit by bit. Just as the medicinal liquid condensed and was about to form a pill, the pill shape suddenly shattered and the medicinal liquid lost all its power. He failed to condense the pill. Chu Fengmian had refined many pills in his previous life, but this was the first time Chu Fengmian had refined a small flying immortal dan. Even if it wasn't an ancient sacred elixir, it wasn't easy to refine. After failing once, Chu Fengmian remained expressionless and continued to refine it a second time. This time, the medicinal liquid gradually condensed. Chu Fengmian learned his lesson and carefully refined the pill. Chu Fengmian opened his palm and the small flying immortal pill fell into his palm. After all, the small flying immortal pill wasn't very difficult to refine. Chu Fengmian succeeded on his second try. Chu Fengmian estimated that the small flying immortal pill should have about 80% medicinal strength. Although it was still acceptable, it was best to refine it to 90% medicinal strength. The small flying immortal pill was related to the success rate of Chu Fengmian's breakthrough. Chu Fengmian could only succeed on his first try to break through to the half-step celestial realm. If he were to fail even once, it would have a huge impact on his future cultivation path. He had to treat it seriously. The third cauldron. Chu Fengmian threw in another batch of sacred elixirs to refine the small flying immortal pill. This time, the small flying immortal pill refined had 90% medicinal strength. After Chu Fengmian gradually became proficient, the small flying immortal pill refined each time had more than 90% medicinal strength. Sometimes, Chu Fengmian could refine 2 small flying immortal pills from a single cauldron of materials. Chu Fengmian was refining cauldron after cauldron of pills. Half a day passed. Chu Fengmian extinguished the cauldron formed by the pure yang skyfire. Chu Fengmian refined a total of 13 cauldrons of small flying immortal pills. Except for the first cauldron that failed, the rest were all successful. As for Chu Fengmian, there were 19 small flying immortal pills in his palm. Chu Fengmian used up all the materials to refine the small flying immortal pills and refine them into 19 pills. A single small flying immortal pill was worth 10 immortal stones. Chu Fengmian should have about 600 immortal stones in total. Adding the small flying immortal pills, it was about 800 immortal stones. He was close to the number of 1,000 immortal stones. As long as he had 1,000 immortal stones, Chu Fengmian would have a chance to break through to the half-step celestial realm. However, it was said that there were only 200 immortal stones left. It was not easy to buy immortal stones now. First, set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Remember, book guest house. Chapter 1936. The Ocean Emperor's birthday was approaching. All the immortal stones in the merchant guilds had probably been bought already. 200 immortal stones wasn't a small number. Even if Chu Fengmian went to a few cities and tried his luck, it would be difficult for him to buy 200 immortal stones. Should I go find the Princess of the Sea and the others first? Chu Fengmian thought about what to do next and shook his head. Chu Fengmian was probably wanted by the Oceanic Sword sect now. If he went to the Princess of the Sea and the others, it would only bring them trouble. Besides, Chu Fengmian had to avoid the Oceanic Sword sect. The overlooking Sword Sea Emperor was furious. With his strength, as long as the Oceanic Sword sect disciples found Chu Fengmian, they would rush to kill him. Even if Chu Fengmian kept hiding, he might not be able to escape the pursuit of a sect. If it wasn't for the Ocean Emperor's birthday, I would have bought enough immortal stones, hidden somewhere, and broken through. I wouldn't be afraid of the overlooking Sword Sea Emperor. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but feel angry, but there was nothing he could do. Because of the Ocean Emperor's birthday, it was almost impossible for Chu Fengmian to break through to the half-step sky realm in a short time. Overlooking the Ocean Emperor's birthday? Overlooking the Ocean Emperor's birthday? Chu Fengmian thought about all these things. Suddenly, an idea popped into his mind. The Ocean Emperor's birthday was in 10 days. Chu Fengmian might as well sneak into the Oceanic Sword sect. One of the reasons Chu Fengmian came to the Songhai Star Zone was to help the Princess of the Sea kill Lan Ming. Lan Ming was an elder of the Oceanic Sword sect. If Chu Fengmian attacked the Oceanic Sword sect as an outsider, he would probably be killed by the Oceanic Sword sect's powerhouses before he could even touch Lan Ming. The Oceanic Sword sect's strength was far greater than the Oceanic Sword sect. They had always been the strongest force in the Songhai Star Zone. Even with Hai Shirsi's arrogance, he didn't dare to provoke the Oceanic Sword sect's disciples. For thousands of years, both the North Sea Palace and the Oceanic Sword sect's positions had been challenged. Only the Oceanic Sword sect, as the overlord of the Songhai Star Zone, was unshakable. On the surface, the Sea Sacrifice sect had more than one celestial realm powerhouse. Chu Fengmian knew of the Sea Sacrifice Emperor and the Eastern Forest Ocean Emperor. In fact, in the minds of all the cultivators in the Songhai Star Zone, the number of celestial realm cultivators in the Sea Sacrifice sect was far more than these two. There were even more celestial realm cultivators who were just hiding. Lan Ming's status in the Sea Sacrifice sect was extremely high. It wouldn't be easy to kill him. After infiltrating the Sea Sacrifice sect, Chu Fengmian would be able to find an opportunity to approach Lan Ming. Then, it would be much easier for him to take action. The other reason Chu Fengmian had come to the Sea Sacrifice sect was to use the glazed clean water to neutralize the primordial blade and the demonic intent in Demon Emperor Blood Demon's heart. The glazed clean water was located in the Sea Sacrifice sect's sacrificial lake. After infiltrating the Sea Sacrifice sect, Chu Fengmian could find an opportunity to go to the sacrificial lake to obtain the colored glazed pure water and kill Lan Ming. Moreover, there was another benefit, which was that he could avoid being hunted down by the Sea Sword sect. No matter how powerful the Sea Sword sect was, they didn't dare to chase after Chu Fengmian in the Sea Sacrifice sect. Chu Fengmian was naturally very safe hiding in the Sea Sacrifice sect. It seems that the Sea Sacrifice sect will be opening and accepting disciples in the next few days. Chu Fengmian looked through Hai Shirsi's memories and suddenly thought of this. The Sea Sacrifice sect would be opening and accepting disciples in the next few days. The Sea Sacrifice sect was also taking advantage of the Sea Emperor's birthday to recruit geniuses and experts from the entire Songhai star field. The Sea Sacrifice sect didn't only accept young geniuses. Some experts would also accept disciples. Many experts from the Songhai star field, including the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu and even half-step celestial realm experts, would join the Sea Sacrifice sect for the various inheritances and benefits of the Sea Sacrifice sect. Lan Ming, for example, used to be a member of the Lan family and not a disciple of the Sea Sacrifice sect. He joined the Sea Sacrifice sect later and directly became an elder. With the strength of the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu, Chu Fengmian didn't need to hide. He could directly participate in the recruitment ceremony and join the Sea Sacrifice sect. Let's go. Thinking of this, Chu Fengmian didn't hesitate. He summoned the immemorial centipede and flew toward the Sea Sacrifice sect. The Sea Sacrifice sect was the most central sea region of the Songhai continent. It was also where the Sea Sacrifice sect was located. Since ancient times, the Sea Sacrifice sect had been the most prosperous sea region of the Songhai star field. Countless geniuses had been born there. The Sea Sacrifice sect also monopolized the Sea Sacrifice sect, winning over countless geniuses and experts to maintain its position as the overlord. The immemorial centipede was extremely fast. Chu Fengmian soon arrived at the Sea Sacrifice sect. At the same time, Chu Fengmian also changed his appearance. After all, Chu Fengmian didn't want to be discovered by the Sea Sword sect. Of course, other than his appearance, what he really needed to change was his aura. Whether it was Chu Fengmian's sword intent, ancestor Tianlong's bloodline, or heaven-devouring beast's bloodline, Chu Fengmian had exposed them in the battle with the Sea Emperor of Waterfront Sword. At this time, if a dragon race expert suddenly appeared in the Songhai star field, the Sea Sword sect would very likely suspect him. Therefore, Chu Fengmian couldn't disguise himself as a dragon. However, Chu Fengmian changed his aura into a bloodline that didn't belong to the dragon race, but had great dragon might. The Dragon Whale bloodline. The Dragon Whale was also one of the major clans of the sea beast. It was said that they inherited the bloodlines of the ancient war dragon and the ancient origin whale. Because the Dragon Whale clan had the dragon bloodline, they also knew how to use the martial skills of the dragon race. Chu Fengmian disguised himself as a dragon whale and used the martial skills of the dragon race, so no one would suspect him. As for the power of the primordial Yuan whale race, Chu Fengmian had killed a lot of primordial Yuan whales in the chaotic ocean. Their essence blood had fused with Chu Fengmian's dragon race bloodline and manifested the dragon whale race's bloodline. If Chu Fengmian wanted to sneak into the Sea Sacrifice sect, he would certainly be heavily investigated by the sect. Therefore, even if it was a disguise, Chu Fengmian had to do it perfectly. Now that Chu Fengmian had the true dragon whale bloodline, even celestial realm experts wouldn't be able to see any problems with it. Chu Fengmian had transformed into an expert of the Dragon Whale clan and went directly to a city in the Sacrificial Sea, the Sacrificial Sea City. This was the biggest city in the Sacrificial Sea. The Sea Sacrifice sect's disciple recruitment ceremony was also held in this city. Chu Fengmian rode the immemorial centipede all the way to the Sacrificial Sea City. The Sacrificial Sea City was much bigger than the Silent Sea City and Jinan City that Chu Fengmian had been to. It was almost as big as a continent. Jinan City was considered a big city in the Songhai star field, but compared to the Sacrificial Sea City, it was nothing. Although it wasn't a remote village, it was only 1% as prosperous as the Sacrificial Sea City. End of chapter. Chapter 1937. The Sacrificial Heavenly Sea City was the largest city in the vast oceanic laughter star region. The Sacrificial Heavenly Sea City was very unique. It didn't have any restrictions or array formations. It was like an empty city. The city didn't have any defensive restrictions or array formations. There was only a small array formation that prevented seawater from entering the city. The martial artists and fey gods that came to the Sacrificial Heavenly Sea City didn't just come from the vast oceanic star region. Many of them came from other distant star regions. The arrival of so many powerhouses should have brought about some kind of chaos. Without the restriction of any restrictions or array formations, the lonely oceanic star region should have been extremely chaotic. However, when Chu Fengmian arrived, he found that although the sacrificial heavenly sea city was bustling with people and carriages, every martial artist was extremely well behaved. There was no sound of quarreling. This was an almost impossible scene in any other city. However, it was happening in the sacrificial heavenly sea city. This was because the sea sacrificial sect was behind the sacrificial heavenly sea city. No one dared to challenge the sea sacrificial sect's prestige. There was no defensive restriction or array formation in the sacrificial heavenly sea city because the sea sacrificial sect was absolutely confident. The sea sacrificial sect was confident that no one would dare to attack the sacrificial heavenly sea city. Although the sacrificial heavenly sea city didn't have any restrictions or array formations, it was more well-behaved and safer than any other city in the vast oceanic star region. No one dared to fight or challenge the sea sacrificial sect's prestige. The sea sacrificial sect's strength is really terrifying. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but notice that even some Emperor Gu and half-step celestial being powerhouses restrained their arrogance when they entered the sacrificial heavenly sea city. They were well-behaved and didn't dare to overstep their boundaries. Looking at the sacrificial heavenly sea city, one could see exactly how tyrannical the sea sacrificial sect was to be able to make so many powerhouses abide by the sect's rules. Chu Fengmian glanced at the sacrificial heavenly sea city and flew directly into the city without going through the city gate. In the vast oceanic star region, strength reigned supreme. Given Chu Fengmian's 9 tribulations Emperor Gu's realm, he could naturally bypass many rules and fly directly into the sacrificial heavenly sea city. Of course, this was also because there was only one rule in the sacrificial heavenly sea city. No fighting was allowed inside. Even if Chu Fengmian directly flew into the city, it wouldn't be considered a violation of the rules. Of course, the martial artists and demon immortals who dared to fly directly into the sacrificial heaven sea city were all famous experts. Flying over their heads was a form of provocation. If it were some weaklings, they would have dared to do such a thing. It was true that no one dared to make a move within the Heaven Tribute Sea City. However, once they left the Heaven Tribute Sea City, there would naturally be people who would step in to teach them a lesson. In fact, they might even bring about a calamity upon themselves. Therefore, most of the martial artists and demon immortals entered the city through the city gate in a well-behaved manner. Only some powerful Emperor Gu of the 9 tribulations and half-step celestial being experts dared to fly directly into the city. Although Chu Fengmian was the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu, the primordial centipede beneath him was a half-celestial realm wild beast that exuded an incomparably terrifying aura. The immemorial centipede originally possessed the bloodline of a desolate beast. It was much stronger than ordinary demonic beasts of the same level. Later, with the help of Chu Fengmian's blood of the heaven-devouring beast, the primordial centipede's ancient bloodline was awakened, making its strength even more powerful. Even some half-step celestial being experts who sensed the primordial centipede's aura turned extremely solemn. They were extremely fearful. Primordial centipede! So powerful! A half-step celestial being primordial centipede. This person can actually tame such a terrifying wild beast and make it his mount? Judging from his aura, he is from the Dragon Whale clan. He is an expert of the Dragon Whale clan. I wonder if this person is here to celebrate the Sea Emperor's birthday or to join the Sea Sacrificial sect. If this person is here to join the Sea Sacrificial sect, I'm afraid he will at least be a deacon or even a guardian. This person is a formidable opponent. We must be careful. Seeing Chu Fengmian's arrival, many experts in the sacrificial heaven sea city began to discuss animatedly. There were even a few people who had their eyes on Chu Fengmian. The sea sacrificial sect's disciple recruitment ceremony was actually a competition. The stronger one's strength and aptitude, the higher their status in the sea sacrificial sect would be. Some young disciples, even if their strength was lacking, but their aptitude was amazing. They could directly become inner disciples or even seed disciples. As for Chu Fengmian, who was an expert himself, he naturally would not become a disciple. Instead, he could directly become a deacon or guardian of the sea sacrificial sect. His status was extremely high. The core disciples of the sea sacrificial sect were also qualified to compete for the position of sect master. Therefore, they were naturally geniuses who had been nurtured since young. Chu Fengmian, who joined the sea sacrificial sect later, could only become an elder. However, the status of an elder of the sea sacrificial sect was extremely noble. It was much higher than the sect masters of some second-rate forces in the vast sea star zone. Even if they went to other star zones, they would still be respected. Therefore, some half-step celestial being experts, who were like ancestors, were willing to join the sea sacrificial sect and assume the position of an elder. In the sacrificial heaven sea city, many Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu, and even some half-step celestial being experts, had come to join the sea sacrificial sect this time. Chu Fengmian's appearance was naturally seen as a strong opponent by them. However, Chu Fengmian did this on purpose. He also wanted to make a name for himself. When he joined the sea sacrificial sect in the future, his status would be higher and it would be more convenient for him to do things. Although there were no restrictions or formations in the sacrificial heaven sea city, every move inside could not escape the eyes of the experts of the sea sacrificial sect. Chu Fengmian's arrival with the immemorial centipede was already enough to attract the attention of the experts of the sea sacrificial sect. Of course, Chu Fengmian attracted some attention at most. It was not that surprising. There were many experts coming to the sacrificial heaven sea city at all times. Many of the mounts of some half-step celestial being experts were not inferior to the immemorial centipede. In a short time, Chu Fengmian saw experts riding Yuan Whale and even Tianlong come to the sacrificial heaven sea city. Every time the sea sacrificial sect opened and accepted disciples, there would be half-step celestial being experts participating. Compared to them, Chu Fengmian did not attract much attention. When he arrived at the sacrificial heaven sea city, Chu Fengmian put the immemorial centipede into the Realm King's cloth pouch. Many martial artists and demon immortals in the sacrificial heaven sea city were not surprised to see this. 1,000-foot Sumeru space was indeed rare and difficult to find in third-class continents like the Azure Dragon Star Zone and the Yenluo Star Zone. But in the vast sea star zone, if a half-step celestial being expert wanted to get it, they could get it without too much effort. Chu Fengmian put away the immemorial centipede and came to the sacrificial heaven sea city. The prosperity of the sacrificial heaven sea city also opened Chu Fengmian's eyes. End of chapter. Chapter 1938. Chu Fengmian stepped into Sacrifice Heaven Sea City and felt the prosperity of the city with countless tall buildings. Many of the world's 10,000 races could be seen in Sacrifice Heaven Sea City. Chu Fengmian could see many of the extinct races recorded in the ancient books of the 9 territories at a glance. At a glance, Chu Fengmian could see countless tyrannical auras. Emperor Realm Masters were the overlords of some low-level continents like the ancient monster continent. But now, even though there weren't many Emperor Realm Masters in Sacrificial Heaven Sea City, Chu Fengmian could see quite a few of them at a glance. There were also many cultivators and monster gods at the Emperor Gu realm. Chu Fengmian even saw a lot of 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu and half-step Heaven Realm Masters. Sacrificial Heaven Sea City was the largest city in the Songhai star field. It was incomparably prosperous and had stood tall in the Songhai star field for tens of thousands of years. It had always been the largest city in the Songhai star field. Its heritage was extremely deep and there were as many masters as there were clouds. These days, the Sea Sacrifice Sect's disciple recruitment ceremony attracted a large number of talented cultivators to gather in Sacrifice Heaven Sea City. Many geniuses from other star fields had arrived at the Heaven Worship City. Coupled with the celebration of the Ocean Emperor's birthday, these two events made the Heaven Worship Sea City more lively than ever. The Sea Sacrifice Sect's disciple recruitment ceremony ends today. Let's go sign up quickly. Chu Fengmian was strolling in Sacrifice Heaven Sea City when he suddenly heard some Sea Clan cultivators around him hurriedly walking towards the center of Lonely Sea City. It's the last day? The Sea Sacrifice Sect's disciple recruitment ceremony lasted 8 days. The first 7 days were for registration, and the last day was for the assessment. So, today was the 7th day. We almost missed it. Chu Fengmian heard the words of these Sea Clan cultivators and walked towards the center of Sacrifice Heaven Sea City. At the center of the Heaven Worship Sea City there was a huge palace. It was 100,000 feet wide, and there were millions of martial artists from different clans in it. These people were all cultivators from various races who had come to sign up for the Sea Sacrifice Sect's disciple recruitment ceremony. Every time the Sea Sacrifice Sect's apprentice recruitment ceremony was held, there were tens of millions of martial artists who came to register. There were even a few times when there were hundreds of millions of martial artists. The number of martial artists and demonic immortals in the Shanghai Star Zone alone was more than 100 billion. In addition to the other star zones near the Shanghai Star Zone, there were more than 1 trillion martial artists and demonic immortals in the countless continents. The number of geniuses that were born was also an astronomical figure. However, each year, the Seashore Sect would only accept about 10,000 disciples. Of course, only those with a 1 in 10,000 chance would qualify to enter. It was extremely difficult to join the Sea Sacrifice Sect. The martial artists and Yao immortals who dared to participate in the Sea Sacrifice Sect's disciple recruitment ceremony were either famous powerhouses or peerless geniuses from other places. Ordinary martial artists and Fey gods didn't even have the qualifications to participate in the Sea Sacrifice Sect's test. Martial artists and Fey immortals who could pass the test and join the Sea Sacrifice Sect were almost all geniuses among geniuses. Senior, are you also here to participate in my Sea Sacrifice Sect's test? Chu Fengmian had just entered the palace when a disciple from the Sea Sacrifice Sect suddenly came over. He was only an outer disciple, but his cultivation was at the Sixth Tribulation True Emperor level. He was only 1 step away from becoming Emperor Gu. Outer disciples, inner disciples, seed disciples, core disciples, and even worse than outer disciples were the errand boys. The Sea Sacrifice Sect's disciples were divided into these 5 categories. Outer disciples were only slightly better than errand boys in a sect like this. They couldn't obtain the complete inheritance of the Sea Sacrifice Sect. However, this insignificant outer disciple had the power of a Sixth Tribulation True Emperor. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. How strong would the inner court disciples, seed disciples, and even core disciples of the Oceanrite sect be? In Chu Fengmian's Sword Dao Gate, a Sixth Tribulation True Emperor was at least an elder. But here, he was only an outer disciple. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh at the disparity in power. However, the Sea Sacrifice Sect was still a power with tens of thousands of years of history. It was normal for it to have such a foundation. In the future, Chu Fengmian's Sword Dao Gate would only grow stronger. My name is Huairen, an outer disciple of the Sea Sacrifice Sect. The outer disciple came over and introduced himself. Correct, I'm here to participate in the Sea Sacrifice Sect's test. May I know where to register? As Chu Fengmian spoke, he calmly took out a few divine-grade spirit stones and handed them to the outer sect disciple of the Sea Sacrifice Sect called Huairen. These are divine spirit stones? Huairen took the spirit stone and felt the pure spiritual energy within. Her expression changed and she became excited. Given his status, he was not qualified to obtain a divine-grade spirit stone. These divine-grade spirit stones were a huge fortune to him. "Senior, please come this way. This is a special place for the seniors. With your status, you will definitely become a deacon once you join the sea sacrifice sect." Huairen took the stones and became even more respectful towards Chu Fengmian. He did not care about the other candidate. However, Chu Fengmian was a peak 9 tribulation ancient emperor realm expert. He was obviously an expert who had made a name for himself a long time ago. Such an expert would have a high status in the sea sacrifice sect. An outer disciple like him naturally didn't dare to offend him. This was especially true since Chu Fengmian was so generous. He answered all of Chu Fengmian's questions. "It seems that there are more people participating in the apprenticeship ceremony this time," Chu Fengmian casually asked while following Huairen deeper into the palace. "That's right. The number of warriors, Fey immortals, and seniors who have come to register for the disciple recruitment this time is much more than in previous years." Huairen nodded. "In a few days, it will be the birthday of our sea sacrifice sect's ancestor, the sea sacrifice emperor. During his birthday, he will also come to select disciples. Many people are here to take him as their master." The sea sacrifice emperor was the oldest expert in the Songhai star field. His name wasn't only in the Songhai star field, but also in the countless star fields around it. Not only was he powerful, but his ability to train disciples was also terrifying. He had personally trained the Donglin Sea Emperor. Many people wanted to become his disciple in order to attain the Celestial Tao and become the second Donglin Sea Emperor. First, set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Book Guest House mobile version website. Chapter 1939. However, Chu Fengmian didn't really care. How could it be possible to pass the Deva tribulation and step into the celestial realm just by being an apprentice? To pass the Deva tribulation and ascend to immortality, the most important thing was still oneself. Whether it was apprenticeship or opportunity, they were all external things that could be used as an aid but not as the foundation. The Donglin Ocean Emperor could pass the Deva tribulation and become the Ocean Emperor because he had the aptitude to become an immortal. Being an apprentice to the Ocean Emperor could only be regarded as an opportunity for the Donglin Ocean Emperor. It was not the foundation for him to become the Ocean Emperor of a generation. Even if the half-step celestial realm warriors in the world were given enough opportunities to be apprenticed to the Ocean Emperor, less than 1 in 10 could pass the Deva tribulation. The rest did not have the aptitude to become an immortal at all. Of course, this was under the condition that there were enough resources. In fact, even if there were 100 half-step celestial realm warriors, there might not be one who could pass the Deva tribulation and reach the celestial realm. The vast sea star region was a second-class continent, but there were very few celestial realm warriors. Chu Fengmian followed Huairen and gradually entered the depths of the palace. The depths of the palace were much quieter than the outside, and there was a square. At a glance, Chu Fengmian could see that the square was a kind of spiritual weapon that was refined by a special method. It could withstand the bombardment of a half-step celestial realm warrior. It seems that this is the place where the experts are tested. Chu Fengmian thought to himself. Generally speaking, the warriors and demon immortals who participated in the sea sacrifice sect's assessment were divided into one category. Those below the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu would take the ordinary assessment. The martial artists and demonic immortals above the 9 tribulations ancient emperor realm were all experts who had been famous for a long time. Their strength was not inferior to the inner sect disciples and seed disciples of the sea sacrificial sect. Therefore, they would not be tested together with others, but would be tested individually. This square was the place where the experts were tested, and the elders of the sea sacrifice sect would personally take the assessment. Chu Fengmian glanced over and saw that there were thousands of people standing in the square, much fewer than the people outside. However, these thousands of people were all martial artists and demon immortals above the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu. Of course, most of them were 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu. There were not many half-step celestial realm experts. Experts who had stepped into the half-step celestial being realm were almost all patriarchs of a sect, figures who had lived for tens of thousands of years. Those who were really willing to join and serve the sea sacrifice sect were still in the minority. However, among these several thousand people, there were at least 30 to 40 half-step celestial tier powerhouses. If they were to be taken out, it would be enough to sweep through one stellar region after another. Even a tenth of the powerhouses gathered in the square would be enough to easily sweep through the Daluo star field. These are the experts of the Songhai star zone. The phrase, experts are as numerous as the clouds, perfectly matched Chu Fengmian's thoughts. Especially the Songhai starfield, which was only a second-class continent. It was said that the 3 sacred realms were hundreds of times more powerful than a second-class continent like the Songhai starfield. Chu Fengmian couldn't even begin to imagine how terrifying the 3 great sacred realms were. While Chu Fengmian was deep in thought, numerous gazes were already looking in his direction. There were many 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu and half-step celestial being realm martial artists and demon gods standing in the square. Their gazes were all sizing up Chu Fengmian. Another one? He looks unfamiliar. He doesn't seem to be someone from the Songhai star zone. He's from the Dragon Whale clan. That's him. Is that the Dragon Whale Emperor Gu who controls the ancient centipede? It's said that the ancient centipede is a half-step celestial being realm wild beast. I wonder if that ancient centipede was tamed by him? If it was, then his strength is simply unfathomable. It shouldn't be. The ancient centipede has the bloodline of a wild beast and is more powerful than martial artists and demon gods of the same realm. This person is only Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations. How could he tame it? I'm afraid that someone subdued the ancient centipede and gave it to him. Then this person's origin is very deep. Hearing these discussions, Chu Fengmian smiled. It seemed that the news of him controlling the ancient centipede to the sacrificial heavenly sea city had indeed spread among the crowd. After all, the ancient centipede that Chu Fengmian controlled was a half-step celestial being realm wild beast. This was enough to attract attention. In addition, the bloodline of the dragon whale was extremely rare and its personality was even more solitary. It was very rare to see it. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had inexplicably gained the title of Dragon Whale Emperor Gu. Huairen brought Chu Fengmian to the square and left. The assessment here was not something that an outer disciple like him could participate in. Chu Fengmian also stepped into the square and walked to a place where there was no one. He stood quietly and waited. Not long after, even more martial artists and demon immortals arrived. Half a day had passed. The gate to the palace in the square closed with a bang. Chu Fengmian knew that the registration was over. Next was the assessment of the sea sacrificial sect. Rumble. Suddenly, another ancient stone gate outside the palace in the square opened. Dozens of figures walked out. These figures were all disciples of the sea sacrificial sect. Each of them had the strength of the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu. These people are the seed disciples of the sea sacrificial sect? Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered as he looked at these figures. These people were all 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, but they were much stronger than the ordinary Emperor Gu. Of course, they were not as strong as Hai Shirsi, but they were comparable to the 14 demon sovereigns that Chu Fengmian had killed in the Linlang dynasty. With such strength, they could be core disciples in the Sea Sword sect, but in the Sea Sacrificial sect, they were only seed disciples. It seems that the weakest core disciples of the Sea Sacrificial sect are at least as strong as Hai Shirsi and Hai 17. Chu Fengmian glanced at them and muttered to himself. He was also observing the strength of the Sea Sacrificial sect. The disciples of the sea sacrificial sect walked toward each person in the square and distributed a jade talisman. Chu Fengmian took a jade talisman and found that there was a number engraved on it. Chu Fengmian's number was exactly 4,300. After the jade talismans were distributed, the disciples of the sea sacrificial sect left the square and walked to the side. They stood in a row and sized up Chu Fengmian and the others again. Occasionally there would be a few conversations. There are quite a lot of people here this time. I don't see any monstrous characters. Humph, I think the strength of these 9 tribulations Emperor Gu is not as good as ours. A bunch of mediocre people want to sneak into our sea sacrificial sect? These sea disciples of the sea sacrificial sect didn't hide anything when they talked. First, they set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Book guest house mobile version website. Chapter 1940. The martial artists and Yao gods on the square could clearly hear the conversation between the disciples of the sea sacrificial sect. Many people had angry looks on their faces. The martial artists and Yao gods on the square had been famous for a long time. When had they ever been humiliated and looked down upon like this? Chu Fengmian frowned, feeling a little unhappy. The conversation between the disciples of the sea sacrificial sect was indeed too arrogant. They simply did not put anyone in their eyes. However, the sea sacrificial sect was the largest sect in the Songhai star zone. It was said that they had the inheritance of the ancient sea god. The disciples of the sea sacrificial sect were all invincible in the same realm. Many of them were extremely disdainful of the martial artists and Yao gods outside. Although many of the martial artists and Yao gods on the square looked angry, no one made a move at this time. They just snorted a few times. After all, they were all here to participate in the disciple recruitment ceremony of the sea sacrificial sect. At this time, they did not want to start a conflict. Boom! After the disciples of the sea sacrificial sect had all taken their positions, a powerful aura suddenly descended. Then, a middle-aged man appeared. This middle-aged man exuded an extremely terrifying aura. Some of the weaker 9 tribulations Emperor Gu could not bear this middle-aged man's aura. This middle-aged man was a half-step celestial realm expert. However, he was much stronger than the ordinary half-step celestial realm expert. He was much stronger than Linlang Jie, who Chu Fengmian had once killed. He was only 1 step away from the peak of the half-step celestial realm. Is this the sacred peace sea king of the sea sacrificial sect? Chu Fengmian glanced at the middle-aged man. Through Hai Shirsi's memory, he knew the middle-aged man's identity like the back of his hand. The Sacred Peace Sea King was one of the elders of the sea sacrificial sect. He usually cultivated in seclusion. His strength was only average among the elders of the sea sacrificial sect, but he was still much stronger than the half-step celestial realm experts outside. In terms of aura, none of the dozens of half-step celestial realm martial artists and Yao gods on the square was a match for the Sacred Peace Sea King. Although aura did not represent one's strength, the Sacred Peace Sea King's aura was so powerful that his strength was naturally not weak. It seemed like the Sacred Transcendent Ocean King would be the host of the apprenticeship ceremony. To preside over the disciple recruitment ceremony, one must have the ability to suppress all the martial artists and Yao immortals present. The fact that the Pingxing Ocean King was sent to preside over the disciple recruitment ceremony meant that he had absolute strength. I will be in charge of the assessment this time. The sacred tranquil king descended and sat on the highest throne. He scanned the warriors and demon immortals on the square. Under his gaze, Chu Fengmian felt as if someone was spying on him. The sacred Pacific Ocean King seemed to have had a fortuitous encounter. His gaze could see through the strength and trump cards of others. None of the fortuitous encounters he had encountered in the past could escape his eyes. It was easy to fake one's identity, but one's strength, trump cards, and fortuitous encounters could not be faked. The seashore sect had put the sacred Pingxing Sea King in charge of the test because they wanted him to check if there was anyone who wanted to fish in troubled waters. The three of you? The sacred tranquil Ocean King's gaze swept across the square, then suddenly fixed on three people on the square. The moment the sacred tranquil Ocean King's gaze locked on them, their expressions changed abruptly. They hurriedly channeled their spiritual energy and fled out of the palace. Chu Fengmian sensed traces of demonic intent in their spiritual energy. Demons. Chu Fengmian didn't notice that there were demons among the martial artists and demon immortals on the square. Demons were the enemies of all races in the world. Not only humans, but also the oceanic tribes and countless other races had a blood feud with them. This feud would not end until one of them was dead. For example, the Six Paths demonic sects could only be considered as demonic sect. However, the pure demonic race was the enemy of all races. These three demons must have some ulterior motive for sneaking into the seashore sect. Attack! The sacred tranquil Ocean King didn't attack the three fleeing demon sovereigns. Instead, he shouted softly. A disciple of the seashore sect standing to the side suddenly rushed toward the three demons. He unsheathed his trident, and with a flash of light, the three demons were pierced through and killed on the spot. These three demons were Emperor Gu of the Nine Tribulations, and were of the same realm as the seashore sect disciple. However, they were mercilessly killed by a single move from the seashore sect disciple. This seashore sect disciple could kill martial artists and demon immortals of the same realm with a single move. Killed with a single move? That's Tsang Lang? It's said that he's one of the best among the seed disciples of the seashore sect. His realm isn't high enough to be promoted to a core disciple, but his strength isn't below that of a core disciple. Amazing! Many martial artists and demon immortals on the square were shocked by Tsang Lang's strength. Even the martial artists and demon immortals of the half-step celestial realm were wary of Tsang Lang. His strength was enough to injure a half-step celestial realm martial artist. Our seashore sect is open to accept disciples. Everyone can come. However, if any of you are a spy, don't blame me for being merciless. The sacred tranquil Ocean King shouted coldly. Immediately, many people on the square were shocked. Soon, a few more people were caught by the sacred tranquil Ocean King. These people all came from a force in the Songhai Star Zone, the Nighthawk sect. The Nighthawk sect was later destroyed by the Oceanic Sacrifice sect. These people all wanted to sneak into the Oceanic Sacrifice sect to cause trouble and take revenge. However, they were all caught by the sacred tranquil Ocean King. Under Tsang Lang's attack, these people were mercilessly killed at the same time. When it was Chu Fengmian's turn, he hid his aura, just like the real Emperor Gu of the Dragon Whale clan. After all, Chu Fengmian had the bloodline of the Dragon Whale clan. Chu Fengmian only needed to hide his strength and show the bloodline of the Dragon Whale clan. The sacred tranquil Ocean King could not detect Chu Fengmian's hidden strength. After confirming that Chu Fengmian had the bloodline of the Dragon Whale clan, he did not continue to investigate Chu Fengmian. It was easy for Chu Fengmian to fool him. After an hour, the sacred tranquil Ocean King's investigation was completed. There were more than 100 people, all of whom had ulterior motives, concealed their identities, or were enemies of the seashore sect. They wanted to sneak into the seashore sect. Without exception, these people were mercilessly killed by Tsang Lang. Even a half-step celestial realm demon immortal was killed by Tsang Lang in 10 moves. Tsang Lang's strength was stronger than Hai Shirsi's. Although he was not as strong as Hai Chang'e, he was strong enough to kill a half-step celestial realm demon immortal. End of chapter. Chapter 1941. The investigation of the Sea Sacrifice sect was extremely strict. Anyone who tried to conceal their identity would be killed on the spot as a precaution. After killing hundreds of experts who were above Emperor Gu of the Nine Tribulations, the other martial artists and Yao gods on the square felt a chill run down their spines. Especially when they looked at Song Lang, many of them were filled with deep fear. These people had all been killed by Song Lang. Even though several Emperor Gu of the Nine Tribulations had attacked them together, they were still easily killed by Song Lang. The Pingxing Sea King did not even make a move. Song Lang, a seed disciple, had killed all of them. This was also a display of power to prove the strength of the Sea Sacrifice sect and to make the martial artists and Yao gods on the scene calm down. Many of the martial artists and Yao gods present had been famous for a long time. Many of them were the ancestors of various sections. Naturally, they were arrogant and domineering in their daily lives. But now, seeing Song Lang, a mere disciple, had such strength, the martial artists and Yao gods on the scene all calmed down and understood the strength of the Sea Sacrifice sect. I've already investigated everyone's identities. All of you are innocent. Those who tried to fish in troubled waters have already been eliminated. The Pingxing Sea King said calmly after checking everyone. Next is the examination. Everyone should be clear about the rules of the Sea Sacrifice sect, so I will not repeat them one by one. The Sea Sacrifice sect's disciple recruitment ceremony would be held every once in a while. Anyone who paid a little attention could understand the rules of the ceremony. No one made a sound and continued to wait for the Pingxing Sea King's words. But this time, the rules are a little different. Anyone who comes up to the stage and defeats 3 disciples of the Sea Sacrifice sect in a row will pass the examination. The Pingxing Sea King said. Of course, after winning 3 battles in a row, you can continue to fight. The more disciples you defeat, the better your performance, and the higher your position in the Sea Sacrifice sect will be. You can even become an elder in one step and sit on the same level as me. Many martial artists and Yao gods' eyes lit up when they heard this, but most people's expressions did not change much. It was easy for the Pingxing Sea King to say this, but in the history of the Sea Sacrifice sect, there were very few people who could become elders of the Sea Sacrifice sect. It was easier said than done to reach the top in a single bound. Even defeating 3 disciples and passing the examination was extremely difficult. The strength of these seed disciples could be said to be the strongest among the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Although it was impossible for all of them to have the ability to kill a half-step celestial being like Blue Wave, it was not impossible for them to be on an equal footing with a half-step celestial being. Defeating 3 people in a row was already extremely difficult. Over the years, when martial artists and demon immortals above the level of a 9 tribulation ancient emperor went to participate in the Sea Sacrifice sect's test, the elimination rate was not as terrifying as the outside world. However, in reality, not even 1 out of 10 people could enter. Chu Fengmian remembered that according to Hai Shixi's memories, one only needed to defeat 2 disciples of the Sea Sacrifice sect to pass the test. There was not much time to take a breather in 3 consecutive battles. If one was injured in the previous battle, they would be at a great disadvantage in the next battle. Many martial artists and Yao gods were aware of the change in the rules. They could not help but frown. It would be many times more difficult to defeat 1 more Sea Sacrifice sect disciple. But the rules of the Sea Sacrifice sect were naturally set by the Sea Sacrifice sect. Now, they could only abide by the rules. After all, the Sea Sacrifice sect's overbearingness had been reflected to the extreme from the beginning of the examination. If they did not abide by the rules, only death would await them. Those whose numbers are called will automatically come to the stage. The sacred tranquil Sea King waved his hand, and the square spun. Suddenly, an arena appeared. The square itself was a spiritual weapon. The Pingxing Sea King could control the square to make changes. The martial artists and Yao gods standing in the square were forced to retreat to the bottom of the arena by a force. At the same time, the jade talisman in the hand of a young martial artist suddenly lit up. The jade talisman represented each person's number. The person whose number was called first would come to the stage to challenge. This young martial artist was a human. Although the Sea clan was revered in the Songhai Star Zone, humans were not common. However, although he was a human, this young martial artist had some Sea clan blood in him. The martial techniques he used were of the Sea clan. This is young Master Honghai? Chu Fengmian saw the young martial artist come to the stage. He searched Hai Shirsi's memory and quickly recognized the young martial artist's identity. This young martial artist was called young Master Honghai. He was the young master of the Honghai sect, a small force in the Songhai Star Zone. Later, when the Honghai sect was destroyed by the Glittering Jewel Dynasty, he was the only one who escaped from the sect. He worked hard and cultivated diligently. Chu Fengmian saw young Master Honghai come to the stage and shook his head. Young Master Honghai had no chance of passing the test. Although young Master Honghai had some fortuitous encounters, it was impossible for him to win all 3 matches in a row. It was unknown whether he could even defeat a disciple of the Sea sacrificial sect. Chu Fengmian's gaze fell on the stage. Young Master Honghai went to the stage and chose the weakest disciple of the Sea sacrificial sect as his opponent. The opponents for the 3 consecutive battles were chosen by the participants on the stage. However, it did not mean that only the weaklings were chosen based on their auras. The strength of one's aura did not represent one's true strength. It was also possible that some disciples of the Sea sacrificial sect would deliberately hide their auras and pretend to be weak. The disciple of the Sea sacrificial sect, who was chosen by young Master Honghai, went to the stage. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he immediately attacked. This disciple of the Sea sacrificial sect showed no mercy. He attacked with a killing move and gained the upper hand in an instant. After 10 rounds, young Master Honghai was easily defeated and thrown off the stage. Young Master Honghai was defeated in an extremely embarrassing manner. He was far from being a match for this disciple of the Sea sacrificial sect. Young Master Honghai can't even defeat one of them? The martial artists and Yao gods around the stage discussed animatedly when they saw young Master Honghai being thrown off the stage. Young Master Honghai was considered a martial artist with some fame. Now that he was on the stage, he could not even defeat a disciple of the Sea Sword sect. This was indeed beyond their expectations. Although they had heard about the difficulty of the Sea sacrificial sect's test, they had only seen it with their own eyes now. He had to win 3 consecutive battles to be considered a success. However, it seemed that defeating even one of them was extremely difficult. End of chapter. Chapter 1942. Next. Seeing this scene, the sacred tranquil king said expressionlessly. The jade talisman in the hand of another warrior lit up. This warrior's strength was even stronger than that of young Master Honghai. He went up to the stage and fought hundreds of rounds with a disciple of the Sea sacrifice sect, but he was still 1 move behind and lost. Several more people were called up to the stage in succession. However, almost without exception, none of them were able to defeat a single disciple of the Sea sacrifice sect before they were defeated. Only a Sea clan demon god defeated a disciple of the Sea sacrifice sect. However, it was a Pyrrhic victory and he had exhausted a great deal of strength. In the next battle, he was already in a very difficult situation. He was defeated within a few moves. Defeating a disciple of the Sea sacrifice sect was extremely difficult for Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations. Moreover, even if he defeated one disciple, he would have to face a second one. There was almost no time to rest. If he continued to fight, it was almost impossible for him to pass the assessment, unless his strength was far superior to the disciples of the Sea sacrifice sect. Chu Fengmian watched this scene quietly, but in his mind, he was studying the sword principle totem. The sword principle totem of the Sea sacrifice sect was ranked 2nd in the sword principle totem. It contained all kinds of mysteries that were not inferior to the 3-sword principal totems in Chu Fengmian's hands. Chu Fengmian had never heard of the innumerable ancient swordsmanship recorded in it. Many of these ancient swordsmanship were extremely powerful, but because it was too complicated to perform, they were forgotten by later generations and their inheritance was cut off. However, for Chu Fengmian, even if it was an extremely difficult swordsmanship to perform, he could see through its origin at a glance. Many of these swordsmanships had some strengths, but because they had too many flaws, they had been lost since ancient times. Chu Fengmian's 9-region swordsmanship was a new swordsmanship created by taking the strengths of thousands of swordsmanships. Chu Fengmian extracted the essence of each swordsmanship and integrated it into the 9 regions swordsmanship. New pages were constantly condensing on the ancient swordsmanship book of the 9 regions swordsmanship. As more and more chapters were condensed, Chu Fengmian's power was also increasing. However, Chu Fengmian's appearance was still calmly watching the match. His aura didn't fluctuate in the slightest, so no one could see the changes in his body. While Chu Fengmian was comprehending the sword Dao totem, he was also occasionally looking at what was happening in the arena. Not long after, there was a sudden commotion. Someone passed the test? Chu Fengmian looked over and saw a half-step celestial realm demon immortal in the arena. Chu Fengmian recognized him as the demon immortal of the Seawolf clan, Qin Lang. He was also a famous expert. Qin Lang was one of the geniuses of the Highlang clan. He had stepped into the half-step celestial realm at a young age. It was said that his future achievements were very likely to break through to the celestial realm. The reason why Qin Lang wanted to join the Sea Sacrificial sect was probably because of the Sea Sacrificial monarch. He wanted to be valued by the Sea Sacrificial monarch and be accepted as a disciple. Qin Lang was a half-step celestial realm demon immortal. It was easy for him to fight against 3 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu's seed disciples of the Sea Sacrificial sect. It didn't take much effort for Qin Lang to pass the test. He was taken away and officially joined the Sea Sacrificial sect. The test was extremely difficult for Emperor Gu of the 9 Tribulations, but it wasn't difficult for half-step celestial realm warriors. As long as they didn't take the initiative to choose someone like the Sea Sacrificial monarch as their opponent, they could almost pass the test. The next few half-step celestial realm martial artists and demon gods, without exception, all passed the assessment easily and joined the Sea Sacrifice sect. Of course, it wasn't that no one among the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu had passed the test. At least a dozen 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu had passed the test. Next, as soon as the sacred Tranquil King's voice sounded, the jade talisman in Chu Fengmian's hand lit up. It was Chu Fengmian's turn. Chu Fengmian also interrupted his thoughts of comprehending the sword Dao totem and stepped into the arena. Is that the Longjing Emperor Gu? He should have no problem passing. After all, he has a half-step celestial realm ancient centipede. It shouldn't be difficult for him to defeat 3 people. Seeing Chu Fengmian enter the arena, some people around discussed. Choose your opponent. The sacred Tranquil King said calmly. It's you. Come up. Chu Fengmian glanced around and finally fixed his eyes on an eagle-nosed disciple of the Sea Sacrificial sect. This eagle-nosed disciple of the Sea Sacrificial sect was one of the disciples who had disdained and ridiculed him at the beginning. However, his aura was considered one of the strongest among the disciples of the Sea Sacrificial sect, so no one had chosen him. How dare he challenge Kuanda? He really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Doesn't he know that Kuanda's strength is close to that of a core disciple? Longjing Emperor Gu? I remember this arrogant guy. It's said that he was the one who controlled the ancient centipede to come to the Sea Sacrificial sect. That ancient centipede is a half-step celestial realm wild beast. It's extremely powerful. So what if it's a half-step celestial realm ancient centipede? It's not like Kuanda has never defeated a half-step celestial realm expert. Some of the disciples of the Sea Sacrificial sect were discussing animatedly when they saw Chu Fengmian's choice. In order to pass the assessment, even a half-step celestial realm martial artist or demon god would choose some weak opponent. For example, no one dared to choose Kuanda or even Songlong. After all, although they were the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, they had defeated a half-step celestial realm expert. Even the most arrogant people did not dare to be arrogant in this assessment. This time there was an accident. After 3 consecutive battles, he actually chose such a strong opponent first. Even if he has the ancient centipede as his backing, he is too arrogant. Around the arena, the martial artists and demon gods who were waiting for the assessment shook their head. They felt that Chu Fengmian's choice was too unwise. How dare you challenge me? The Sea Sacrificial sect disciple by the name of Kuanda sneered when he saw that Chu Fengmian had chosen him. He took a step onto the stage and looked at Chu Fengmian. After sizing him up, he revealed some disdain. You are not qualified to challenge me with your strength. I heard that you have this half-step celestial realm ancient centipede? Summon it. Kuanda stared at Chu Fengmian, and the disdain in his tone was undisguised. Is that so? Unfortunately, I don't think you have the ability to force me to summon the ancient centipede. I am enough to deal with you, Chu Fengmian said casually. Genius memorized this site's address in a second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 1943. Chu Fengmian said in a casual tone. However, the arrogance in his words was vividly reflected. At first glance, one could tell that he was an extremely arrogant person. His words were full of absolute confidence. Little guy, you're quite arrogant, but I'd like to see how arrogant you are. When Kuanda heard Chu Fengmian's words, he laughed instead of being angry. However, everyone could feel a murderous intent in his laughter. Kuanda had the intention to kill. Although the two sides would not kill each other in the assessment of the Seashore sect, according to the rules, once on the stage, life and death would be determined. Die! Kuanda roared and took the lead to speak. The martial technique of the Seashore sect was the most ancient inheritance of the Sea clan. Suddenly, his power condensed on his fist, and he punched at Chu Fengmian. 4 Seas Divine Fist. Under the stimulation of Kuanda's fist, the power of his bloodline burst out completely. Kuanda had a little bit of the ancient Yuan whale clan's bloodline, so his power was boundless. Although it was a martial technique of the Sea clan, his brute force surpassed that of a demon god. The moment the fist was blasted out, the violent power could be felt by everyone present. Many half-step celestial realm martial artists and demon gods around the arena could not help but show some deep fear in their eyes. The power of Kuanda's 4 Seas Divine Fist alone was not inferior to a real half-step celestial realm martial artist. The power of his bloodline was fully activated and condensed on this fist. The power of this fist was so powerful that even a half-step celestial realm martial artist would not dare to take it head-on. The fist wind blasted directly at Chu Fengmian's strong body. It was not flashy but pure power. Competing with strength? Break. Chu Fengmian sneered when he saw Kuanda's fist. At the same time, the power of the dragon whale bloodline was activated and he suddenly blasted out a palm. The moment the palm was blasted out, the spiritual power condensed and suddenly turned into a battle dragon claw, colliding with Kuanda's fist in the air. The power of the battle dragon claw came down and swept away everything. Kuanda's fist wind resisted the power of the battle dragon claw for a moment before it could no longer resist and suddenly shattered. Kuanda's figure was swept away by the battle dragon's claw. The powerful force caused him to spit out blood as he was sent flying. Kuanda fell out of the ring. Now, he didn't even have the strength to stand up. He was seriously injured by a palm strike. It would take at least a few years for him to recover. One move. Am I seeing things? So strong. Kuanda is one of the top seed disciples of the Sea Sacrifice School. Even I've heard of him, but he was defeated by a single move? What kind of martial skill did Longjing Emperor Gu use? Did you guys understand? From the looks of it, it should be a dragon clan's martial skill. Not bad, it should be a top-quality dragon ancestor's martial skill. Furthermore, this person's comprehension of the dragon clan's martial skills is extremely deep. I actually couldn't see any flaws in that move. So powerful. No wonder Longjing Emperor Gu dared to challenge Kuanda. I didn't expect him to hide such strength. We even underestimated him. It seems that this person will definitely pass the test. Moreover, the strength he displayed is so powerful. I'm afraid he will have a very high status in the Sea Sacrifice School. The martial artists and Yao gods around the ring looked at Chu Fengmian and discussed animatedly. Even those who had passed the test looked at Chu Fengmian. Their eyes lit up as if they were considering something. He's a good person. Even the sacred Tranquil King looked at Chu Fengmian with a hint of approval. In the Sea Sacrifice School, strength was everything. The stronger one was, the more respect one would receive. On the other side, several disciples of the Sea Sacrifice School hurriedly ran over to check on Kuanda's injuries. Many of their faces changed when they saw how serious Kuanda's injuries were. This kind of injury would take several years to recover. The competition within the Sea Sacrifice School was extremely fierce. These seed disciples also needed to constantly improve their strength to maintain their status. Once they were surpassed by others, they would be deprived of their resources. For a seed disciple like Kuanda, who had a promising future, being unable to improve for several years was simply a disaster. Several disciples of the Sea Sacrifice School, who had a good relationship with Kuanda, looked at Chu Fengmian with deep killing intent. How could he be so ruthless? A disciple of the Sea Sacrifice School looked at Chu Fengmian with a hint of anger in his eyes. Kid, just you wait. When you enter the Sea Sacrifice School, I will avenge Kuanda, is that so? You don't have to wait that long. My next opponent is you. Come on up. Chu Fengmian said indifferently when he heard the disciple's words. It's Kuan Yun. This person's strength is above Kuanda's. The Longjing Emperor Gu's next opponent is actually him. This is interesting. Kuan Yun will definitely avenge Kuanda. The demon immortals and the disciples of the Sea Sacrifice School, who were waiting for the assessment around the arena, all looked like they were waiting to watch a good show. Kuanda and Kuan Yun were of the same clan. They grew up together and had a deep friendship. After Chu Fengmian injured Kuanda, he challenged Kuan Yun. There would probably be a great battle. Alright, just you wait. I will make sure you die without a burial place. I will give you some time to leave behind your last word. Otherwise, you will die without any last word. Kuan Yun jumped into the arena and looked at Chu Fengmian with surging killing intent. You talk too much. Let's fight. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and said disdainfully. In his eyes, it was as if Chu Fengmian did not even care about Kuan Yun. You are courting death. Kuan Yun sneered and suddenly attacked. His attack was extremely fast. Before his voice died away, he had already attacked. His body suddenly changed and turned into a huge yuan whale that was a few 100 feet long. His huge body crashed towards Chu Fengmian. The last time Kuanda fought with Chu Fengmian, he did not use his full strength and was defeated by Chu Fengmian with a sudden move. This time, Kuan Yun learned his lesson. He turned into his original form and displayed his strongest strength. After turning into his original form, Kuan Yun's brute force was many times stronger than a human's. Although his speed was reduced, Kuan Yun turned into a huge yuan whale that was a few 100 feet long and charged towards Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian did not even have the chance to dodge. If he wanted to dodge, he would have to leave the arena. However, according to the rules, once he left the arena, he would be considered to have failed. Please remember the domain name of this book. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 1944. In this arena, Kuan Yun's strength is much more terrifying than outside. This kid is too arrogant. He is going to suffer a great loss. At this time, he won't even have the chance to summon the primordial centipede. He is too arrogant. He is only asking for trouble. There are no weaklings in the sea sacrificial sect. Although this guy is strong, he is too arrogant. With his strength, he will definitely be in a high position in the sea sacrificial sect. At that time, he will be groomed by the sea sacrificial sect and his strength will be even more terrifying. If he is defeated by Kuan Yun at this time, all his efforts will be in vain. Many of the half-step celestial realm martial artists and demon gods shook their heads. The Yuan whale clan was the clan with the strongest brute force among the sea beasts. In this narrow arena, it was enough for Kuan Yun to exert all his strength and defeat Chu Fengmian. Even if it were them, they might not have the ability to withstand Kuan Yun's attack. However, even the half-step celestial realm martial artists and demon gods would not choose someone like Kuan Yun when they were choosing an opponent. It would be asking for trouble. Many people shook their heads and looked at Chu Fengmian with disdain. He was only a piece of trash with strength but no brains. In the arena, Kuan Yun, who had turned into a huge Yuan whale, was charging towards Chu Fengmian. The huge Yuan whale exploded with a tyrannical force that could crush everything in front of it. The entire arena shook as if it could not withstand such a huge force. Chu Fengmian stood where he was and looked at the huge Yuan whale that was charging towards him. He did not even try to avoid it. Just as the huge Yuan whale was about to hit Chu Fengmian suddenly moved. He raised his hand and suddenly, the dragon power burst out. The power of thousands of Dragon Clan martial skills condensed at this moment and turned into a huge dragon claw that was 1,000 feet long. Rumble! The huge dragon claw collided with Kuan Yun in the arena. Kuan Yun's body trembled and the huge Yuan whale's body was caught by the huge dragon claw. In the next moment, he was thrown down. Bang! Kuan Yun's body was crushed by the gigantic dragon claw. He reverted to his human form and was held in the palm of the gigantic dragon claw. Kuan Yun, who had fallen into the dragon claw, was in an incomparably miserable state. His body was already seriously injured and he was unable to escape from Chu Fengmian's grasp. One move, yet another defeat in one move. Not only did he defeat Kuanda, but he also defeated Kuan Yun with the same move. The surroundings of the arena were silent. Whether it was the disciples of the Sea Sacrifice sect or the martial artists and Yao immortals who were waiting to take the test. It was as if no one had expected this to happen. Among these people, even though there were some who believed that Chu Fengmian had hidden his strength, they believed that he would only be able to emerge victorious after fighting with Kuan Yun for a while. However, he did not expect Chu Fengmian to defeat Kuan Yun so easily. They couldn't clearly see the profundity of Chu Fengmian's move, but they could all feel how terrifying it was. If Chu Fengmian had defeated Kuanda with one move, there was a possibility that it was because Kuanda was too arrogant and did not use his full strength. However, this time around, Kuan Yun had learned his lesson from Kuanda. When he attacked, he reverted to his original form and unleashed his full strength. However, he was still easily defeated by Chu Fengmian with one move. Oh? This person's move has faintly integrated thousands of Dragon Clan martial skills. Could this be the 9 moves of the ancestor? Some of the martial artists and Yao immortals who had some understanding of Dragon Clan martial skills could faintly see the profundity of Chu Fengmian's move. The 9 moves of the ancestor. The thousands of Dragon Clan martial skills in the world today were derived from the 9 moves of the ancestor. The move that Chu Fengmian had just executed seemed to have integrated thousands of different Dragon Clan martial skills. It was simply similar to the 9 moves of the ancestor. It's still a little noisy. It's not the real 9 moves of the ancestor. However, this person's comprehension of Dragon Clan martial skills has indeed reached an extremely high level. Even among the real Dragon Clan, there are very few Dragon Clan geniuses who can comprehend Dragon Clan martial skills to such an extent. This person is only Longjing. It seems that he has had a fortuitous encounter to be able to comprehend Dragon Clan martial skills to such an extent. Many people looked at Chu Fengmian and whispered to each other. Even the sacred transcendent Sea King looked at Chu Fengmian with glittering eyes, as if he was thinking about something. In the arena, Kuan Yun was still struggling in Chu Fengmian's hand. However, no matter how hard he struggled, he could not escape from Chu Fengmian's hand. Looking at the gazes below, Kuan Yun felt a sense of humiliation. Kuan Yun was a disciple of the Sea Sacrifice sect. Although he had been defeated by Chu Fengmian, he was still arrogant. He looked at Chu Fengmian and roared loudly. "Damn it! Little bastard, let go of me. Otherwise, when we reach the Sea Sacrifice sect, you will suffer." "Oh? You still dare to insult me at this time? You are courting death." When Chu Fengmian heard Kuan Yun's words, killing intent flashed in his eyes. Just as he was about to strike, a voice sounded from the side. "Let go of Kuan Yun." Although his voice sounded light and airy, there was a hint of command in his tone. Chu Fengmian looked to the side and saw that the person who had spoken was Tsang Lang. When Tsang Lang saw that Chu Fengmian was about to kill Kuan Yun, he tried to stop him. However, he was not trying to persuade Chu Fengmian. Instead, he was threatening Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian looked at Tsang Lang and rolled his eyes as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian sneered. "Let him go? I don't think there is such a rule in the arena. Who do you think you are? How dare you order me around? I did not want to kill him. Since you have spoken, he can go to hell." As Chu Fengmian spoke, he suddenly exerted more force in his hand. Kuan Yun's body was squeezed until it swelled up. Eventually, it reached its limit and shattered into pieces. Kuan Yun was crushed in Chu Fengmian's hand. That was not the end. Chu Fengmian gathered his spiritual energy and suddenly struck out with his palm. Kuan Yun's body had just been crushed, but his essence blood that had escaped did not escape the palm and was completely destroyed. This palm cut off all of Kuan Yun's vitality. He did not even have the chance to reconstruct his body and died on the spot. As a seed disciple of the Sea Sacrifice sect, Kuan Yun was killed by Chu Fengmian in the arena. This scene caused the people below the ring to feel a chill in their hearts. End of chapter. Chapter 1945. What is he trying to do? Does he want to make an enemy out of Tsang Lang? There are many people from the Kuan family in the Sea Sacrifice sect. Killing Kuan Yun will cause a lot of trouble. He's too arrogant. He might not be afraid of Tsang Lang. Look at his attack just now. It's different from before. He's obviously hiding his strength. Is he going to pick Tsang Lang as his next opponent? Isn't he courting death by picking Tsang Lang? Tsang Lang's strength is enough to kill a half-step to celestial being. He's just Emperor Gu of the 9 tribulations. How can he challenge Tsang Lang? The martial artists and demon gods below the arena started to discuss when they saw Chu Fengmian's action. Everyone knew that there was no difference between life and death in the arena. However, there were only a few people who dared to kill a disciple of the Sea Sacrifice sect in the assessment arena. Moreover, Tsang Lang had spoken just now. However, Chu Fengmian killed Kuan Yun without taking Tsang Lang's words seriously. This was a provocation to Tsang Lang. Courting death? Seeing Chu Fengmian kill Kuan Yun without hesitation, Tsang Lang looked at Chu Fengmian coldly. His eyes were full of killing intent. Suddenly, a force burst out from Tsang Lang's back and turned into a blade. It slashed at Chu Fengmian, who was in the arena. He could not tolerate Chu Fengmian's provocation of his authority. However, just as the blade was about to hit Chu Fengmian, a surge of spiritual energy burst out in the air. Pingxing Si King smashed Song Lang's blade into pieces with a casual blow. Outsiders are not allowed to interfere in the arena, Pingxing Si King said coldly. He glanced at Song Lang. Seeing Pingxing Si King intervening, Song Lang could only suppress his anger. However, the murderous intent in his eyes did not diminish at all when he looked at Chu Fengmian. Boy, I'll kill you even if you enter the Sea Sacrifice sect. You probably don't know how powerful I am. How dare you make an enemy out of me? Song Lang said coldly as he stared at Chu Fengmian. These words were a blatant threat. According to the rules of the Sea Sacrifice sect, disciples of the same sect were not allowed to kill each other. However, Song Lang's words were completely ignored. The pacifying Sacred Ocean Emperor remained silent. In his opinion, as long as no one interfered with the trial, he would not interfere. Rules were rules, but in the Sea Sacrifice sect, power was everything. If you were weaker than someone else, then you died. No one would sympathize with the weak. Who will you choose for the next battle? The sacred Transcendent Ocean King turned around and looked at Chu Fengmian. His expression did not change at all. Kuan Yun had been crushed to death by Chu Fengmian, so it was not worth his attention. To the Sea Sacrifice sect, Kuan Yun was just an insignificant figure. There were thousands upon thousands of disciples like Kuan Yun in the Sea Sacrifice sect. Even if one of them was killed by Chu Fengmian today, it wasn't worth Chu Fengmian's attention. Moreover, when Kuan Yun attacked earlier, he already had killing intent. Now that he was killed by Chu Fengmian, there was nothing much that he could say. My next opponent will be him. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered and finally landed on Song Lang. A cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Didn't you want to kill me? You don't have to wait until I join the Sea Sacrifice sect. Come up now. Alright, Song Lang shouted coldly. Without any hesitation, he moved his body and stepped into the arena. His cold eyes fell on Chu Fengmian. The word alright contained endless anger. Song Lang had already suppressed the anger in his heart and was prepared to attack Chu Fengmian when he joined the Sea Sacrifice sect. But now that Chu Fengmian had chosen him as his opponent, he could release his anger. No one has ever dared to challenge me. Kneel down and kill yourself now, and I can leave your corpse intact. Otherwise, you can wait to suffer a fate worse than death. Song Lang stared at Chu Fengmian. His voice was filled with killing intent. Anyone who heard Song Lang's words would feel a chill in their heart. The killing intent in Song Lang's words could not be faked. In the arena, life and death did not matter. Even if Song Lang killed Chu Fengmian, it would be a meaningless death. Even if Chu Fengmian had some power behind him, he would not dare to seek revenge. Otherwise, it would be a challenge to the dignity of the Sea Sacrifice sect. No power in the entire Songhai Star Zone dared to challenge the Sea Sacrifice sect's dignity. You're not that strong, but you talk big. Facing Song Lang's threat, Chu Fengmian played it down. He stood there, not showing the slightest bit of nervousness. This made many people wonder if Chu Fengmian was hiding his strength. Was that why he was so confident when facing Song Lang? Although Song Lang had not shown his full strength, everyone present had seen how ruthless he was when he dealt with those spies. Chu Fengmian must have something to rely on if he dared to show such confidence. But even if everyone thought that Chu Fengmian had something to rely on, he would not be a match for Song Lang today. Song Lang's strength was not as simple as he had shown. Song Lang's face turned even colder when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. He stared at Chu Fengmian and said, "You're only relying on that immemorial centipede. Release it. Otherwise, you won't even have the chance to attack when I attack. I will kill you in one move." Is that so? Kill me in one move? Chu Fengmian looked at Song Lang and suddenly attacked. The moment he attacked, a dragon roared and two phantoms appeared behind Chu Fengmian. These two phantoms were extremely huge, at least 10,000 feet tall. They were primogenitor Tianlong and Xianjing. These were the phantoms of the two innate divine beasts. Although Chu Fengmian's dragon whale bloodline contained very little Xianjing bloodline, he still summoned the Xianjing phantoms with the help of the Genesis Qi in his body. The moment the two phantoms appeared and poured into Chu Fengmian's body, his aura was completely different from before. If Chu Fengmian was an ordinary person just a moment ago, then the current Chu Fengmian was a giant beast that had suddenly awakened. The power of Xianjing and primogenitor Tianlong burst out at the same time. Powerful and boundless power erupted. Many of the onlooking half-step celestial realm martial artists and demon gods felt a sense of danger the moment they sensed the power. Everyone guessed that Chu Fengmian must have hidden his strength. That was why he dared to challenge Song Lang. But now, the power that Chu Fengmian suddenly burst out was beyond their expectations. It was too terrifying. End of chapter. Chapter 1946. The power of the two shadows burst out, making Song Lang somewhat unable to withstand it. Song Lang was in the center of the pressure of the two forces in the arena. He felt that the power of the two shadows was like two mountains that pressed down on his body. Song Lang roared and a trident suddenly condensed in his hand. At the same time, his body roared and countless scales suddenly grew on his body. His body grew many times larger. Song Lang was originally a member of the Sea clan. Transforming into his true form was when he was at his strongest. Song Lang transformed into his true form of the Sea clan. Holding the trident in his hand, he immediately rushed towards Chu Fengmian. Thousands of sharp lights slashed towards Chu Fengmian at the same time. Song Lang has been forced to reveal his true form. It's been a long time since Song Lang used his full strength. I didn't expect to see it today. This Longjing Emperor Gu is also very powerful. I didn't expect him to have hidden his strength so well. There will definitely be a fierce battle between him and Song Lang. Many disciples of the Poseidon sect, as well as the surrounding martial artists and Yao gods who were waiting for the assessment, were watching the battle carefully. They also wanted to see the true strength of Chu Fengmian and Song Lang and their true trump card. In the Poseidon sect, all disciples were enemies. Now that they could see Chu Fengmian's true strength, they could be prepared in the future. However, just when everyone thought that the fierce battle was about to begin, all of a sudden, a series of explosions took place in the ring. The two shadows behind Chu Fengmian merged into Chu Fengmian's body and the wind from his fists. Chu Fengmian punched out with both fists. The two completely different forces burst out from Chu Fengmian's hands at the same time. They complemented each other and shattered the countless sharp lights from Song Lang's trident. Boom! After shattering the countless sharp lights, the two fists landed heavily on Song Lang's body. The trident in Song Lang's hand was immediately shattered by the power of the two fists. The boundless power bombarded Song Lang's body. Puff! Countless scales on Song Lang's body were shattered. He spat out a large amount of essence blood from his mouth. He was seriously injured by Chu Fengmian's fist. Didn't you want to kill me in one move? Is this your strength? A piece of trash? How dare you speak such arrogant words? Chu Fengmian looked at Vast Wave and shouted coldly. The instant he spoke, Chu Fengmian suddenly grabbed it. Song Lang was completely powerless in front of Chu Fengmian's power. He was caught in the palm of Chu Fengmian's hand. Chu Fengmian exerted some force with his palm, and Song Lang was crushed to death just like Kuan Yun. Song Lang's strength was indeed a little more powerful than an ordinary martial artist of the half-step celestial realm, but in front of Chu Fengmian, it was still not enough. After killing Song Lang, Chu Fengmian stood calmly in the ring. At this point, there were still many martial artists, Yao gods, and disciples of the Sea Sacrifice sect who had yet to recover from the previous scene. Many people were still looking in the direction of the arena in disbelief. Song Lang was killed by Chu Fengmian just like that? In their hearts, they still felt that there would be a fierce battle between Chu Fengmian and Song Lang in the arena. But he didn't expect it to end so quickly. In just one move, Song Lang was killed by Chu Fengmian. Even Song Lang didn't have the slightest ability to resist. He was simply vulnerable in front of Chu Fengmian. Was Song Lang too weak? But everyone could see the strength that Song Lang had displayed just now. Moreover, when facing Chu Fengmian, Song Lang had revealed his true form of the Sea Clan. Obviously, he had used his true strength, but he was still killed by Chu Fengmian in one move. Sacred Tranquil King's eyes were full of deep surprise. He sized up Chu Fengmian for a long time. Suddenly, he sent a jade talisman into the Sea Sacrifice sect to send a message to someone. How strong is this man? I don't know. How can he kill Song Lang with one move? Even the core disciples of the Sea Sacrifice sect may not be able to do so. Did you guys see the last punch? He actually mobilized the power of Xianjing and ancestor Tianlong at the same time. This kind of fist technique is unheard of. No wonder he has the immemorial centipede as his mount. It seems that his strength alone is extremely terrifying, not to mention his profound background. Among the onlookers, even the half-step celestial realm martial artists and demonic immortals, there was a lot of fear in their eyes as they looked at Chu Fengmian. Obviously, they were frightened by Chu Fengmian's last punch. Chu Fengmian's last punch was a fist technique that he had suddenly created based on what he had learned. Chu Fengmian's understanding of martial Tao was no longer limited to one move or style. Although he couldn't create immortal arts yet, he still couldn't do so. Although he couldn't create immortal arts yet, he could still create several moves that were close to swordsmanship. Dragon Whale Sea-Splitting Fist, Chu Fengmian murmured. This was the name of the punch that Chu Fengmian had just performed. It was also what he would rely on to become the Dragon Whale Emperor Gu in the future. I didn't expect such a person to appear in this year's batch. He can kill Songlong with one move. Amazing. Such a person is comparable to the best among the core disciples. Unfortunately, he's too strong and wasn't nurtured by the Sea Sacrifice sect. Otherwise, he would have the ability to compete for the position of sect lord in the future. Pingxing Sea King looked at Chu Fengmian with some emotion. Experts like Chu Fengmian could only become deacons, protectors, or elders if they joined the Sea Sacrifice sect. They couldn't become core disciples. Among the core disciples of the Sea Sacrifice sect, only the geniuses nurtured by the Sea Sacrifice sect since childhood had a clean background. For example, although Chu Fengmian and the others could also have a high status in the Sea Sacrifice sect, they couldn't become core disciples and compete for the position of sect lord. After a while, the jade talisman that Pingxing Sea King sent out seemed to have received a reply. He glanced at it and then said to Chu Fengmian, "You've passed the test. You can go in directly. Behind the palace is the Sea Sacrifice sect. Someone will receive you there." Pingxing Sea King said to Chu Fengmian. He didn't ask Chu Fengmian to wait here. Chu Fengmian's heart trembled. He knew that Pingxing Sea King must have other arrangements. After all, Chu Fengmian had passed the test 3 times in a row. 3 consecutive battles ended in 3 moves. Even among the half-step celestial realm martial artists and demon immortals who came to participate in the test, few could do that. Moreover, Chu Fengmian was just a 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. In the last battle, Chu Fengmian killed Songlong with one move. Songlong was quite famous in the Sea Sacrifice sect. His strength was not weaker than the core disciples. After Chu Fengmian killed Songlong, the Sea Sacrifice sect members looked at Chu Fengmian with fear. They didn't dare to provoke Chu Fengmian anymore. End of chapter. Chapter 1947. In the Sea Sacrifice sect, strength was the most important thing. The stronger one was, the less people dared to provoke them. If one was blindly submissive, they would only be looked down upon and bullied. Kuan-de, who had been injured by Chu Fengmian before, now looked at Chu Fengmian with incomparable fear. He no longer had any thoughts of revenge. This was the benefit of strength. Seeing the sacred tranquil monarch's unique arrangement of letting Chu Fengmian enter alone, the surrounding cultivators and Yao gods didn't dare to make a sound. Strength was everything. Chu Fengmian's strength naturally attracted some attention from the Sea Sacrifice sect. However, this was exactly what Chu Fengmian wanted. Chu Fengmian had joined the Sea Sacrifice sect to get close to Lan Ming and get close to the legendary sacrificial lake to obtain the colored glaze pure water. Chu Fengmian had gathered some information on the sacrificial lake along the way. The sacrificial lake was the holy land of the Sea Sacrifice sect. It was very similar to the Sword Lake of the Seasward sect. It was said that any cultivator or Yao god that entered the sacrificial lake would experience a sharp increase in strength and obtain great benefits. However, entering the sacrificial lake was much more difficult than entering the Sword Lake of the Seasward sect. One had to go through layers upon layers of inspection before entering the sacrificial lake. This was because the sacrificial lake wasn't just a holy land for the Sea Sacrifice sect's disciples, it also concealed shocking secret. It was the core of the Sea Sacrifice sect. The Sea Sacrifice sect's name highlighted the word sacrifice. As the name implied, the sacrificial lake was one of the most important places in the Sea Sacrifice sect. Even though Chu Fengmian had used a lot of methods, he still hadn't obtained accurate information about the sacrificial lake. However, there was one thing that Chu Fengmian understood. Regardless of whether it was the disciples of the Sea Sacrifice sect, the protectors, or the elders, only those with extremely powerful strength and extremely high status in the Sea Sacrifice sect were qualified to enter. If Chu Fengmian had joined the Sea Sacrifice sect as an ordinary deacon or guardian, he probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to enter the sacrificial lake for decades. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had displayed such strength in order to attract the Sea Sacrifice sect's upper echelons to value him. That way, his chances of entering the sacrificial lake would be much higher. Of course, all of this could only be done if Chu Fengmian truly joined the Sea Sacrifice sect. The sacred Pingxing Sea King had arranged for Chu Fengmian to enter the Sea Sacrifice sect first, and Chu Fengmian understood his intentions. Clearly, the sacred Pingxing Sea King's people wanted to rope him in. The Sea Sacrificial sect was also divided into different factions. For example, the Sacrificial Lake, the Sea Sacrificial sect's Law Enforcement Hall, the Sacred Panacea Hall, and so on. Although they all had their own duties and belonged to the Sea Sacrificial sect, they were still independent factions. For example, the Sacred Peace Ocean King belonged to one of these forces. The truly outstanding geniuses who had yet to officially join the Sea Sacrifice sect would be snatched away by these forces. It didn't matter to Chu Fengmian which force he joined. In any case, he didn't come here to cultivate for a long time. On the one hand, he was here to avoid the pursuit of the Sea Sword sect. On the other hand, he was here for the glazed clean water and to kill Lan Ming. However, since the tranquil Sacred Ocean King wanted to rope him in, Chu Fengmian could also raise some conditions to prepare for the sacrificial lake. Chu Fengmian thought as he walked past the palace. At the end of the palace was a teleportation formation. The Sea Sacrificial sect was, of course, not in the Sacrificial Heaven Sea City. The Sacrificial Heaven Sea City was only a gateway. Only through this teleportation formation could one reach the real Sea Sacrificial sect. Chu Fengmian stepped into the teleportation formation. Suddenly, the world spun and he felt that he had arrived in a unique world. This was also a small world with an extremely rich spiritual qi. The spiritual qi here was much richer than any place Chu Fengmian had ever been. Cultivating here almost didn't need to worry about the lack of spiritual qi. Moreover, Chu Fengmian constantly sensed an ancient aura among the spiritual weapons here, as well as a little bit of the power of the chaos. This is actually a small world similar to the Desolation era? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but think as he sensed the spiritual qi in this small world. It was said that the most ancient world was called the Desolation Era. It was an incomparably huge world, so huge that it was boundless. On that continent, there was a rich aura of the chaos everywhere. Therefore, in that era, there were countless experts, immortals, and even immortal emperors. Later on, when the Desolation Era was shattered, there were countless continents and worlds. Most of the aura of the chaos disappeared along with the Desolation Era. However, there were still some small worlds that still had remnants of the aura of the chaos. For example, the Mad Dragon Emperor had found a mountain that was filled with the aura of the chaos. That was why he was able to rely on the aura of the chaos to suppress his injuries and keep him alive. The Sea Sacrificial Sect had also found a small world that contained the aura of the chaos. It was in this small world that the Sea Sacrificial Sect was established. However, this small world was indeed very suitable for the Sea Tribe. In the center of this small world was an incomparably huge lake. Although it was a lake, its size was even bigger than an ocean. There were tens of thousands of islands on the lake. On each island there was a splendid palace. Each island was like a faction that was independent of each other. Many disciples of the Sea Sacrificial Sect were walking through it. What Chu Fengmian was most wary of was an ancient temple-like structure at the center of the island. Inside this ancient temple, Chu Fengmian sensed an aura that made him shudder. The Celestial Realm. In that temple-like building, there was a real Celestial Realm expert. And that person was even stronger than the waterfront sword emperor that Chu Fengmian had fought before. Who is it? Is it the Sea Sacrificial Emperor, or the Eastwood Sea Emperor? Or perhaps the other hidden sea emperors of the Sea Sacrificial Sect? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but wonder. Inside the Sea Sacrificial Sect, Chu Fengmian didn't dare to wantonly use his spiritual sense to investigate. He could only watch from afar and guess. In addition, Chu Fengmian also sensed a number of powerful auras in the lake. It seemed that many of the Sea Sacrificial Sect's experts and old-timers were hidden in the lake. With a casual glance, Chu Fengmian knew how terrifying the Sea Sacrificial Sect was. Although many of their auras weren't in the celestial realm, they were like Yu Wuhan, people who could break through the celestial tribulation at any time. It was no wonder that the Sea Sacrificial Sect had always been the most important faction in the Cerulean Sea starfield. Its overall strength was indeed unfathomable. End of chapter. Chapter 1948. Although Chu Fengmian had successfully sneaked into the Sea Sacrifice Sect, he still had to be careful. You're the person that Elder Pingxing asked me to pick up? While Chu Fengmian was still sizing up the Sea Sacrifice Sect, a person suddenly flew out from the depths of the sect, looked at Chu Fengmian, and asked. Chu Fengmian turned his head and saw a young man with a strong aura. His strength had reached the peak of the 9 Tribulations Emperor Gu, and he was even stronger than Song Lang, whom Chu Fengmian had killed. However, the young man's clothes didn't look like those of a disciple, but were much more luxurious. At a glance, one could tell that his status in the Sea Sacrifice Sect was definitely not low. His name is Qin Han, a protector of the Heavenly Sea Pavilion of the Sea Sacrifice Sect. This time, I'm here to pick up someone on the order of Elder Pingxing. Are you the person that Elder Pingxing asked me to pick up? Qin Han looked at Chu Fengmian and asked. Yes, it's an honor to meet you, Protector Qin Han. Chu Fengmian said calmly. The Elder Pingxing that Qin Han mentioned was naturally the Sacred Ocean King. In the Sea Sacrifice Sect, only those who were half a step into the celestial realm could be promoted to an elder. Although Qin Han wasn't an elder, his status as a protector wasn't low. Normally, people with good strength like Chu Fengmian couldn't become disciples when they entered the Sea Sacrifice Sect. Instead, they would become stewards, deacons, protectors, elders, and so on. They were responsible for managing the affairs of the Sea Sacrifice Sect. There were millions of disciples in the sea sacrifice sect. Seed disciples and core disciples were only a small part. There were also a large number of inner disciples, outer disciples, and even handyman disciples. These disciples all needed someone to manage them. Therefore, people like Chu Fengmian who joined the sea sacrifice sect often became stewards or deacons. They were responsible for managing the disciples of the sea sacrifice sect. It seemed that Qin Han was similar. However, he had already become a protector. His status in the sea sacrifice sect was extremely high, only below the elders. His status was equivalent to that of a core disciple. The status of an elder of the sea sacrifice sect was even higher than that of a core disciple. Only the best among the core disciples were qualified to be on an equal footing with an elder. You don't have to be so courteous. Once you join the Heaven Sea sect, we'll be colleagues. Your strength is something that even the Pavilion Master admires. He'll definitely put you in an important position. By then, you might even become a guardian of the Heaven Sea sect. Qin Han smiled at Chu Fengmian. He wasn't arrogant. He had heard of Song Lang's strength. A person who could kill Song Lang in one move was definitely not a weakling. He was only a peak 9 tribulation ancient emperor, and had no advantage over Chu Fengmian. Now that he did not know Chu Fengmian's strength, he did not want to provoke Chu Fengmian. Heaven Sea Pavilion? Asked Han Fengmian to the Sea Pavilion sect. Song sect to sect. To sa was to him, was to be a was a was a belong to the was a to be was. What? You don't want to join? Our Heavenly Sea Pavilion is one of the strongest forces in the Sea Sacrifice sect. If you join us, you'll benefit a lot in the future. Qin Han could not help but ask when he heard Chu Fengmian's question. Forget it. I can't make the decision. Come with me to the Heavenly Sea Pavilion. The Pavilion Master will see you. If you have any questions, you can ask him directly. Qin Han said and prepared to leave with Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian thought for a moment and followed Qin Han. They turned into a ray of light and flew towards the Heavenly Sea Pavilion. Since he had just arrived at the Sea Sacrifice sect, he didn't know much about it. He might as well follow Qin Han. However, Chu Fengmian didn't want to join the Heavenly Sea Pavilion. The Heavenly Sea Pavilion wasn't famous, and its status in the Sea Sacrifice sect shouldn't be too high. The Law Enforcement Hall, Sacred Elixir Hall, and Sacrificial Lake were the strongest forces in the Sea Sacrifice sect. Chu Fengmian wanted to join the Sacrificial Lake the most. That way, he could get closer to Lan Ming and look for opportunities. However, joining the Sacrificial Lake wasn't easy. The Sacrificial Lake was the most mysterious force in the Sea Sacrifice sect. Ordinary disciples weren't qualified to join it. As a newcomer, it was even more impossible for Chu Fengmian to join the Sacrificial Lake directly. Protector Qin Han, what benefits will I get if I join the Heavenly Sea Pavilion? Can I go to the legendary Sacrificial Lake? It is said that as long as I cultivate in the Sacrificial Lake, my strength will undergo earth-shaking changes when I come out. Is it true? Chu Fengmian followed Qin Han to fly all the way and asked him about it indirectly. The Sacrificial Lake? Qin Han's eyes revealed some disdain and mockery when he heard Chu Fengmian's question. He seemed to be mocking Chu Fengmian for being ignorant. However, he didn't show it. After a while, he said, those who can cultivate in the Sacrificial Lake are the elders and core disciples of the Sea Sacrifice sect. Even among the core disciples, there are only a few who can go there. As for the benefits of cultivating in the Sacrificial Lake, I don't know. However, it is similar to what the rumors say. The strength of the disciples and elders who can cultivate in the Sacrificial Lake will increase a lot. You don't have to ask so many questions. These things aren't up to me to decide. You can ask the Pavilion Master when we arrive at the Heavenly Sea Pavilion. Qin Han's tone also revealed a bit of impatience, and the speed of the escape light accelerated a little. However, at this moment, another escape light suddenly appeared in front of the two of them and blocked their path. Chu Fengmian's eyes flashed. It was a young man in the escape light. The young man's face was tough and incomparably arrogant. Although he hadn't spoken yet, Chu Fengmian could tell at a glance that this young man was absolutely lawless. He was also in the Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu's realm, but his strength was above Qin Han's. In terms of strength, he was even more powerful than Yin Longxian, whom Chu Fengmian had met before. Apart from Chu Fengmian himself, he was the strongest Nine Tribulations Emperor Gu he had ever seen. Once this young man stepped into the half-step celestial being realm, he would be close to the half-step celestial being realm. Moreover, Chu Fengmian also felt an incomparably ancient aura from this young man. This incomparably ancient aura was hidden very deeply, but it couldn't escape Chu Fengmian's eyes. It proved that this young man should have obtained some ancient and shocking adventures, so that he could have such powerful strength. Set a small goal first, such as 1 second to remember. Book Guest House Mobile Edition. Chapter 1949. Even such a person is willing to join the Ocean Sacrifice sect? Chu Fengmian was astonished. The clothes of the young man in front of him were very similar to Qin Han's. His identity was also a protector. He wasn't a genius disciple cultivated by the Ocean Sacrifice sect. For this young man to possess such strength, he must have obtained a heaven-shaking opportunity. Such a person should not dare to submit to others. However, he had joined the Ocean Sacrifice sect. This gave Chu Fengmian a new understanding of the Ocean Sacrifice sect's strength. Chu Fengmian was astonished, but his face didn't change as he watched from the side. Wu Ju? Why are you stopping me? Qin Han's expression changed slightly when he saw the young man's arrival. He snorted coldly. Why am I stopping you? Don't you know? The pacifying Sacred Sea King is presiding over this assessment because he wants to fill his own pockets and recruit this outstanding person to the Heavenly Sea Pavilion? Wu Ju sneered. Leave him here and you can go. Wu Ju, does your ancestral pavilion want to meddle in this? When Qin Han heard this, he said with a sullen face. Elder pacifying Sacred Sea King wants this person. Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to explain yourself? Ancestral pavilion? Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered when he heard Qin Han's words. He didn't expect Wu Ju to be a member of the ancestral pavilion. Moreover, it sounded like Wu Ju was here to recruit Chu Fengmian to join the ancestral lake. Chu Fengmian was worried that he wouldn't be able to join the ancestral pavilion. He didn't expect to meet someone from the ancestral pavilion so soon. Chu Fengmian was overjoyed, but his expression didn't change. He was too excited at this moment, which would only make others feel that something was wrong. Pacifying Sacred Sea King? If he dares to cause trouble, let him go to the ancestral pavilion. I'm going to sue him for violating the rules and stuffing his own pocket. Wu Ju stared at Qin Han and his eyes gradually turned cold. I don't want to fight here. Don't force me. You! Qin Han's face turned pale. He didn't want to let him go, but he also knew that he was far from being a match for Wu Ju. Even if they fought, he would lose without a doubt. Go. After considering for a long time, Qin Han flicked his sleeve and directly turned into an escape light and flew away. At least you know your place, Wu Ju muttered to himself as he glanced at the departing Qin Han. Then, he looked at Chu Fengmian. You're the one who killed Song Lang in one move? I've seen Song Lang before. He's quite a character and can be promoted to a core disciple. Can you kill him in one move? Wu Ju said as he sized up Chu Fengmian. His tone was filled with suspicion. Suddenly Wu Ju moved. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched at Chu Fengmian. This sudden sneak attack caught many people off guard, but Chu Fengmian reacted in an instant. Chu Fengmian was just about to deliver a killing blow when he sensed that Wu Ju's attack had no killing intent. It was just a test. Chu Fengmian also clenched his right hand into a fist and punched out. It was the dragon whale sea-splitting fist that he had created before. However, this time, Chu Fengmian retained 30% of its power. He punched out and collided with Wu Ju's fist. The two forces collided in the air, and both of them took a few steps back. Oh? Not bad. You're able to take my punch. It seems that your strength is not fake, Wu Ju said as he retracted his attack after testing Chu Fengmian. I can see that you're still hiding your strength. However, you have to understand that when we reach the sacrificial pavilion, you don't have to hide your strength anymore. You have to serve the sacrificial pavilion with all your strength. Do you understand? Yes, Chu Fengmian said expressionlessly. Wu Ju didn't say anything else. He turned into a ray of light and brought Chu Fengmian to the center of the sea sacrificial sect. The sacrificial pavilion was responsible for guarding the sacrificial lake. The sacrificial lake was located in the center of the sea sacrificial sect. However, when Wu Ju and Chu Fengmian approached the sacrificial temple, they suddenly landed on an island. This island was one of the closest islands to the sacrificial temple, but it was outside of the temple. Chu Fengmian thought that after joining the sacrificial pavilion, he would be able to enter the sacrificial temple and search for the colored glaze pure water. The colored glaze pure water was recorded in the sacrificial lake. However, it seemed that it wouldn't be so easy to enter the sacrificial temple and approach the sacrificial lake. Aren't we going to the sacrificial lake? Chu Fengmian asked without batting an eyelid. You know quite a lot. You actually know that the sacrificial lake is in the sacrificial temple? Wu Ju's eyes flickered. He glanced at Chu Fengmian and continued. Our sacrificial pavilion is responsible for guarding the sacrificial lake, but we can't enter the sacrificial temple. I know that you also want to cultivate in the sacrificial lake and reap the benefit. However, a newcomer like you isn't qualified. Only by working hard for the sacrificial pavilion and accumulating contributions will you be able to enter the sacrificial lake, understand? Wu Ju looked at Chu Fengmian and lectured. Chu Fengmian didn't answer. A moment later, the two landed on the island. Although it was called an island, it was almost the size of a country. There were at least several thousand disciples here, enough to form a power of their own. The sacrificial pavilion was one of the smaller factions in the sea sacrificial sect. The larger factions had tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of disciples. Despite their small numbers, those who could join the sacrificial pavilion were 1 in 10,000 geniuses. Thus, its power was extremely terrifying in the sea sacrificial sect. Protector Wu Ju. All the sacrificial pavilion disciples along the way bowed successively when they saw Wu Ju arrive. The weakest of them was Emperor Gu, an inner disciple of the sea sacrificial sect. Outer disciples with the strength of true emperors weren't qualified to join the sacrificial pavilion. Several thousand of them were Emperor Gu. Chu Fengmian couldn't imagine such a terrifying force in the Daluo star field. But now they could be seen in the sacrificial pavilion, a faction that belonged to the sea sacrificial sect. Wu Ju brought Chu Fengmian all the way to the highest palace on the island. Just as they arrived at the palace's door, a powerful voice sounded. Bring him in. Yes. Wu Ju was very respectful towards the owner of the voice. He brought Chu Fengmian into the palace. The palace was very spacious with only a huge throne in the center. A handsome middle-aged man sat on the tall throne. He sat on the throne, and Chu Fengmian could feel a huge pressure from him even though he had yet to make a sound. End of chapter. Chapter 1950. This kind of pressure came from the middle-aged man's power. The middle-aged man's strength had reached the limit. His physical body seemed unable to contain it. His tyrannical power spread out, affecting everything in the surroundings. This kind of pressure came from this. The middle-aged man was still a half-step celestial being, but the moment he saw him, Chu Fengmian felt the same as Long Qianju. This young man was also the kind of person who could break through the celestial tribulation and ascend to immortality at any time. However, Long Qianjue had only been able to suppress his power because of his injuries. The middle-aged man, on the other hand, had deliberately used a secret technique to conceal his power. That was why the Deva tribulation hadn't descended yet. This young man was one of the experts Chu Fengmian had sensed when he first arrived at the seashore sect. The sacrificial pavilion was responsible for guarding the sacrificial lake. This was the most important thing. The elder in charge of the sacrificial pavilion was naturally not inferior in strength. Chu Fengmian observed the middle-aged man on the throne. Wu Ju, who was beside him, stepped into the palace and stood before the throne. He respectfully spoke. "Lord Lan Ming." "Lan Ming? This person is Lan Ming?" Chu Fengmian was taken aback when he heard Wu Ju's words. He wanted to sneak into the sacrificial lake to find traces of Lan Ming. He didn't expect the elder in charge of the sacrificial pavilion to be Lan Ming. Chu Fengmian had just arrived at the seashore sect when he encountered Lan Ming. He didn't know if he was lucky or unlucky. Chu Fengmian originally thought that Lan Ming was just an ordinary half-step celestial being expert. With such strength, Chu Fengmian could deal with him. However, the Lan Ming in front of him wasn't much different from a true celestial being expert. As long as he was willing, he could trigger the celestial tribulation in an instant. Once he passed the tribulation, he would ascend to immortality and become a celestial being expert. With Lan Ming's current strength, passing the celestial tribulation was as simple as eating and drinking. There wouldn't be any danger. Chu Fengmian also observed that Lan Ming should be cultivating this unique immortal technique. This immortal technique was related to the Black Whale bloodline. His reluctance to transcend the Deva tribulation was closely related to this immortal technique he was cultivating now. Most likely, such immortal arts could only be cultivated by those below the celestial realm. Or perhaps, like the immortal true body, once cultivated by those below the celestial realm and transcended the Deva tribulation, they would reap great benefit. It was no wonder that Lan Ming was so desperate to find the princess of the sea. His immortal technique had not been completed because he did not have enough Black Whale bloodline. If he managed to find the princess of the sea and snatch her Black Whale bloodline, he would be able to reach the heavenly human stage and become the Ocean Emperor. This Lan Ming is not easy to deal with. I need to plan carefully. However, now that I have joined the Ancestral Pavilion, I will definitely come into contact with Lan Ming in the future. I will act when the time is right. Chu Fengmian quietly deduced many things in his heart. Given Chu Fengmian's current experience, he was no longer the young man who had never left the 9 regions. With his current experience, he could see many mysteries of Lan Ming at a glance. Chu Fengmian discussed animatedly in his heart, but his expression was extremely respectful as he followed Wu Ju and bowed. "You've brought him. Not bad." Lan Ming, who was sitting on the throne, slowly opened his eyes. The moment he stared at Chu Fengmian felt as though he had been seen through. Lan Ming's gaze was even more terrifying than the gaze of the Sea Sword Sect Master that Chu Fengmian had met before. Under this gaze, it seemed that all kinds of concealment would be seen through. However, Chu Fengmian was now confident that no one would be able to see through his secret unless it was a true celestial realm expert. Chu Fengmian had concealed most of his strength and bloodline. However, Chu Fengmian still deliberately revealed a little flaw. He revealed a small portion of progenitor Tianlong's bloodline in exchange for Lan Ming's attention. The stronger Chu Fengmian was, the higher his status in the Ancestral Pavilion would be in the future. Moreover, a little bit of progenitor Tianlong's bloodline was nothing. Although the innate divine beast bloodline was rare, it wasn't impossible to see. Not bad, not bad. You are indeed a good person. No wonder that trash Ping Xing wanted to rope you in directly. Lan Ming sized Chu Fengmian up and said calmly, "Are you willing to join the ancestral pavilion and serve it?" "I am willing." Chu Fengmian's expression didn't change as he said, "Good." Lan Ming made a gesture. Wu Ju beside him suddenly took out a jade talisman and injected spiritual power into it. Immediately, Chu Fengmian's name and appearance appeared on the jade talisman. At the top of the jade talisman were the words Ancestral Pavilion. From today onwards, you are a protector of the Ancestral Pavilion. You must serve the Ancestral Pavilion. If you dare to betray the Ancestral Pavilion, our Ancestral Pavilion has the right to clean you up. Do you understand? Wu Ju looked at Chu Fengmian and revealed a sinister smile. His face revealed a bit of madness. Now, quickly kneel down and hand over your fortune and wealth. Then, open your Dao heart and let Lord Lan Ming plant a restriction. After Chu Fengmian agreed to join the Ancestral Pavilion, Wu Ju suddenly changed his appearance and reprimanded Chu Fengmian. Just a moment ago, he was still amiable, but the moment Chu Fengmian officially joined the Ancestral Pavilion, he seemed to have fallen into their trap and revealed his true colors. Sitting on the throne, Lan Ming didn't speak. He watched everything with cold eyes. The moment his gaze fell on Chu Fengmian, a huge force suppressed him. The sacrificial pavilion actually wants to subdue me and make me their slave? Chu Fengmian saw through Lan Ming and Wu Ju's intentions at a glance. Making someone open their Dao heart and plant a restriction was no different from being a slave. The Ancestral Pavilion rarely accepted new people. Chu Fengmian was a bit puzzled as to why they valued him. He didn't expect that they wanted to subdue him and make him their slave. Although Chu Fengmian could escape if he used all his strength, it wouldn't be easy for him to sneak into the Sea Sacrifice sect again if his identity was exposed. It was better to compromise here and take things one step at a time. Moreover, with Chu Fengmian's Dao heart, he didn't believe there was any restriction that could control him. Chu Fengmian thought quickly and made a decision. Riches and honor came from danger. Although it was dangerous this time, it was also an excellent opportunity. First, set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Remember, book guest house. Chapter 1951. Chu Fengmian's heart was extremely calm, but he pretended to be panicked. There shouldn't be such a rule when I join the Sea Sacrifice sect. You want me to open my Dao heart and be planted with a restriction? Do you want me to be a slave? Humph, the ritual pavilion is so overbearing. Then I won't join the ritual pavilion. Chu Fengmian stood up as he spoke. He struggled to resist Lan Ming's power and flew out of the palace. However, a massive palm suddenly descended. This palm belonged to Lan Ming, who was sitting on the throne. Chu Fengmian couldn't resist the power of this palm at all. He was suppressed to the ground and couldn't use any spirit force. What? You want to leave? The ritual pavilion isn't a place where people can come and go as they please. You've already joined the ritual pavilion. Why don't you want to follow the ritual pavilion's rules? Wu Ju stared at Chu Fengmian and sneered. His eyes were filled with killing intent. You're now a member of the ritual pavilion. Your life and death belong to the ritual pavilion. Do you understand? If you continue to resist, be careful that you won't be able to beg for death. At this time, pledging loyalty to Lord Lan Ming is your only chance. You. Chu Fengmian's face alternated between green and white. He pretended to be considering it. However, killing intent was brewing in his heart. No matter what, Chu Fengmian would kill Wu Ju sooner or later. Seeing that Chu Fengmian didn't answer, Lan Ming on the throne coldly snorted and suppressed him with power. Chu Fengmian pretended to be unable to resist. He spat out a large mouthful of blood and hurriedly spoke. I'm willing to submit. Very good. Open your Dao heart and hand over all your fortuitous encounters. Lan Ming smiled when he saw that Chu Fengmian was willing to submit. Yes. Chu Fengmian opened his Tao heart. Lan Ming pointed his finger and a wave of spirit force entered Chu Fengmian's Tao heart. It turned into a restriction. Once the restriction was planted in his Tao heart, Chu Fengmian's life and death would be controlled by Lan Ming. He would be no different from a slave. However, Chu Fengmian also quietly used the sky-devouring mystic technique to devour the power of this restriction the moment Lan Ming entered the restriction. Chu Fengmian's sky-devouring mystic art could even devour the restrictive arrays left behind by celestial realm expert. Although this Lan Ming's strength was tyrannical, he had yet to truly reach the level of the celestial realm. He was only a half-step celestial realm powerhouse. In the span of a breath, 99% of the power of the restriction that Lan Ming had just placed on Chu Fengmian's Tao heart was obliterated. With only a little power left, Lan Ming could still sense that there were still restrictions in Chu Fengmian's Tao heart. As for the remaining bit of power, Chu Fengmian could neutralize it at any time. Although it appeared that Chu Fengmian had been subdued, the restriction did not affect him in the slightest. However, Chu Fengmian still pretended to be extremely unwilling to accept this to confuse Lan Ming and Wu Ju. Very good. As for the rest, hand over your empty ring, as well as all the opportunities you have on you. Lan Ming looked at Chu Fengmian like he was looking at a slave. You should know the consequences if you don't obey. As he spoke, Lan Ming quietly activated the restriction. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian stood on the spot and trembled involuntarily. He revealed a pained expression as he hurriedly answered. Yes, master. Master. Chu Fengmian trembled on the spot. Yes, yes. Chu Fengmian took off the empty ring on his hand and handed it directly to Wu Ju. In order to hide his identity, Chu Fengmian had also specially made a separate empty ring to conceal his identity. Chu Fengmian had already concealed the real empty ring, so outsiders couldn't detect it at all. Now this empty ring only contained less than 1% of Chu Fengmian's true wealth. However, this wealth was already extremely exaggerated for a 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. The wealth in this empty ring was no less than the wealth of an ordinary half-step celestial realm martial artist's demon god empty ring. Wu Ju picked up the empty ring, walked directly to the throne, and handed it to Lan Ming. Oh? There are quite a lot of things. What is this? Fist technique? Dragon whale sea-splitting fist? Lan Ming opened one of the jade talismans, which recorded the dragon whale sea-splitting fist. Chu Fengmian had disguised this dragon whale sea-splitting fist as a fist technique created by a dragon whale clan powerhouse. Chu Fengmian had only obtained it. In addition to this empty ring, there is also the opportunity on you. Hand it over. Ancestor Tianlong's bloodline isn't something you are qualified to obtain. This thing will only bring disaster to you. Hand it over. Lan Ming sized up Chu Fengmian's empty ring, then his gaze fell on Chu Fengmian. This. Chu Fengmian's expression was extremely ugly when he heard this. He seemed to be hesitating. What, you don't want to? Don't you know the situation you're in now? Lan Ming's gaze was somewhat cold and murderous. Hand it over, I'll hand it over. Chu Fengmian's expression was extremely helpless, but he seemed to be unable to resist Lan Ming. He could only move his palm suddenly, and a mass of chaotic blood flew out. It was a mass of Ancestor Tianlong's essence blood. Chu Fengmian's face became extremely pale when he took out the mass of Ancestor Tianlong's essence blood. He seemed to have fallen into an extremely weak state. Of course, all of this was Chu Fengmian's disguise. This mass of Ancestor Tianlong's essence blood was only a part of the Genesis Qi. It was simply a drop in the ocean for Chu Fengmian. However, he still looked like he was in great pain. Good stuff. Lan Ming was extremely excited when he saw the mass of Ancestor Tianlong's essence blood. He stood up from his throne and waved his hand. The mass of Ancestor Tianlong's essence blood fell into his palm. Lan Ming seemed to be in a good mood after obtaining the mass of Ancestor Tianlong's essence blood. He directly threw the empty ring to Wu Ju. "This empty ring is your reward," Yi Futian said. "Thank you, Lord Lan Ming." Wu Ju received the empty ring with great joy. "You're called Chu Fengmian, right? From now on, you're a protector of the sacrificial pavilion. As long as you serve the sacrificial pavilion well, I will also give you benefit. Do you understand?" Lan Ming turned his head and looked at Chu Fengmian coldly. Yes, I will serve the sacrificial pavilion well. I won't hesitate even if I have to die 10,000 times. Chu Fengmian appeared to be panicking as he hurriedly said. Lan Ming was satisfied with Chu Fengmian's performance. He nodded and said, "Good. Looking at your performance today, you're quite obedient. You can leave first. As soon as you receive a message from the Jade Talisman, hurry over. Do you understand?" "Yes." When Chu Fengmian heard this, he hurriedly turned into a streak of light and left the palace as though he had been granted amnesty. First, he set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Remember, book guest house mobile version website. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.